Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to Conversations for the Future. Yesterday was a great day of discussion, and we're glad you're back for day 2 of our conference on space money. We're going to jump right into our content today. Our first speaker, Ronald Epstein with Bank of America, will talk about the public markets from an analyst's perspective. Ronald Epstein is a managing director in America's Equity Research, covering aerospace, defense, and multi-industrials with large aerospace components. He's based in New York and covers companies listed in the United States, Canada, and Brazil. He joined Merrill Lynch in 2001. In the Institutional Investor All-America Research Poll, he was ranked as a top 3 analyst in aerospace and defense electronics for the last 13 years and number 1 for the last 7 years. He is a fellow of the Royal Aeronautical Society and is also a mentor for the Techstars Space Accelerator. We have some friends who've participated in that. He is frequently cited as an industry authority by trade and news publications and has appeared on numerous television programs. Previously, he worked as a research scientist in applied aerodynamics technology at Boeing Phantom Works. He was also an adjunct faculty member in the Department of Mechanical Engineering at Washington University in St. Louis, teaching fluid dynamics and control systems. Dr. Epstein has a BA with highest honors from Skidmore College, an MBA with honors from the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania, and a PhD in mechanical engineering from Duke University. Ron, it's a good thing we have Wharton in common because as a Tar Heel, I'm not sure we could otherwise be friends.
Yeah, no. Hey, it's all right. We all like ACC basketball, right?
True.
End of an era, right? Coach K's retired.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah,
But I do like that you're wearing your Carolina blue today.
yeah. Yeah. So where would you like me to start? I'm hoping that we can make this a little bit of a conversation, right?
Great. Yeah, we had some wonderful conversations with venture capital, angel investors, and economists yesterday. Love to have the analyst perspective. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your role and how you approach it first?
yeah. So I mean, I cover me and my team, I should say. I got to give credit where it's due. We cover about 40 companies. It's always a moving number because of M&A and so on and so forth. Everything from the usual suspects, Boeing, Lockheed, that kind of thing, all the way down to smaller suppliers, and lately commercial space companies have kind of come into our coverage largely through SPAC related
Yeah.
transactions, right? So we currently cover Virgin Galactic, Astra. There's some others that are in the queue that will have coverage of in the not so distant future. So, so my role is really, who are my clients? So unlike an investment banker or a venture capitalist or a private equity person, my client isn't the company. My client is my fiduciary responsibilities to investors. So when you think about my role, I mean, I spend probably half my time dealing with institutional investors, probably a third of my time doing investment banking related stuff. And then the balance, we've got roughly 25,000 financial advisors in the Merrill Lynch system, is helping them out. So our research is used by them and so on and so forth. So kind of everything I do from a research perspective is always flavored by kind of who my clients are, what their interests are, and doing that. So when
Yeah.
you look at a company like let's just use Virgin Galactic as an example. I mean, it really was the first commercial space company to be in the public market, but it is, I think, similar to how can I say? There's no shortage of new startup companies coming into the A&D space, not just in commercial space, right? You've got launch, you've got satellite constellation companies, Earth imagery, whatever. But then also there's eVTOL, alternative propulsion. There's a lot of interesting innovation going on in my world. But the challenge for someone like me becomes a lot of these companies before this boom in SPACs probably would have been private longer.
Yes.
So it becomes I think the trick is, how do you prep the public market investor to deal with companies that are, historically pretty young.
Yeah.
In some cases pre-revenue, most cases pre-earnings, most cases pre-cash flow. Right. So, and that's not a bad thing. It's just different than I think what a lot of folks are used to. Trying to advise investors on how to deal with that is
Yeah.
kind of the unique challenge that has presented itself to me in my kind of traditional role, and my peers doing the same thing.
Yeah. Is there another industry that you can compare this phase to where maybe companies were coming in earlier, whether it was the tech revolution or, the internet boom with social media? So talk about another
Yeah, I mean,
angle.
we've looked at a couple different things. So internet is one of them for sure. Tech is one of them. Biotech is another one.
Okay.
A
Yeah.
lot of biotech companies is pretty binary, right? I mean, what they're doing either works or it doesn't work. Gets approved, doesn't get approved, that kind of thing. So there's some similarities, but there's also differences, right? Big
Mm-hmm.
differences. I would say one of the bigger challenges has become, to many public market investors who are quote unquote sophisticated investors, they can access private markets no problem.
Right.
So, what's interesting about a SPAC transaction, or some of these early stage companies, is they're potentially attractive to a retail investor, because a lot of retail investors can't access private markets, right? They can't get to these things. So to a retail investor who wants to invest in an early stage company, if they're fully cognizant of the risks, right, because it's a different risk profile, it's an interesting way for them to do that, right? So if you look at, just use an example of a company like Astra, right? I mean, it's a very early stage launch company. Most, a public investor, just my mom, right, wouldn't have access to that, but now she could buy shares in that if she wanted to,
Yeah.
and as long as she understands the risks that presents. It's not Lockheed, it's not Boeing, it's, there's potentially a lot of upside, but maybe it doesn't work, right? I mean, there's risk there. Um, I find, like with many of these companies, it tends to attract a more retail audience than
Mm-hmm.
institutional audience, because those institutional investors can get at this anyway through other
Right.
markets. Yeah.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense. Um, Talk a little bit about this strange market that we have going on where things aren't trending with earnings necessarily. The earnings ratios are way different from what the stock prices are. We've got different factors that we hadn't had in the past, GameStop, all that stuff going on. Now we have Tesla way overvalued, and then the CEO makes an announcement and it makes a correction. So many strange new things going on in the market with the availability of communication and building coalition online. And then you have space companies coming in as SPACs, differently entering at an earlier time, like you were talking about. Talk about how those things come together and what that means for investors looking at these opportunities.
Yeah, I think your example with Tesla, and not making a judgment if it's overvalued or
Sure.
not. I don't cover it. It's not, but you've seen the volatility, right? So I think
Yeah,
one of
yeah.
the things that the environment that we're in has caused a lot of volatility, more volatility than probably would have been there before. And I think there's a couple of factors you have to bear in mind. Going through the pandemic, right? I mean, we really haven't, nobody on this call, I'm certain, has done that before. I mean, the world is, going through, hopefully ending soon, or nearly ending, or transitioning to some sort of more boring endemic thing that's not a big deal. Um, we just haven't gone through this, and it has pretty profound implications on everything from global government policy, national security policy globally, not just in the U.S. Um, uh, government spending,
Yeah.
social policy. And then you had this whole dynamic of it really, I mean, this was probably the coming of age for, I mean, look at what we're doing now, right? So having the ability to work very effectively remotely, in some cases, very remotely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, before, I mean, not to get off subject, but before, I'm certain, at least in my world, I'm going to work from home on Friday. Well, everybody's like, okay, whatever. He's going to go play golf. But work from home now is a whole different dynamic, right? It's not necessarily that anymore. So it changed a lot of different things. When I think about the pandemic, kind of at the highest level, it was a great amplifier.
Mm-hmm.
Things that went into the pandemic in some way weak came out weaker, and things that went into the pandemic strong came out stronger. And you can see that in companies that had went in the pandemic strong came out stronger. The ones that came out weak, that went in weak, came out weaker. So in my world, if you use just as a convenient example, Airbus versus Boeing. Boeing went in
Yes.
flat-footed because of everything going on
Yeah.
in the 737. Now, kind of post-pandemic, where are we? Airbus is doing very well, and doing better than Boeing. You pick your metric, right? So the pandemic was this great amplifier. So everything from what do you want to call it? Social media investing, the Reddit effect or whatever. All that I do believe was accelerated and magnified by the pandemic,
Yeah.
and that has just increased the level of volatility. So we have a market now where you've got those factors and you have a ton of liquidity, right? I mean, so if anything, I'm not a market strategist, but if anything sort of worries me in the back of my head, there's just so much liquidity. There's so much money chasing risky assets, and I think that the how can I say it, the number of SPAC related transactions we've had, I think that's just an indicator of how much liquidity there is looking to take risk.
Yeah.
That's all. I mean, I think it's just that simple.
Hmm. You mentioned national security and government funding. Talk a little bit about how those changes are. I mean, a lot of aerospace companies rely pretty heavily on government funding. Talk a little bit about that dynamic for us.
Yeah, I think for better or for worse, the government is still, and I would say for better, a big supporter and big customer of space. The Department of Defense, the national security community, because it's broader than just defense, is a big user of space assets. And SpaceX is a great example. They're a good partner with the Air Force about getting assured access to space. The whole business model that they have done with the Falcons and what they do for the Air Force, it's unique. And I don't know, probably 10 years ago, probably folks thought that couldn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
So I find for a lot of these startup companies, if they can get a government customer, it's a nice base of business, sometimes recurring. It's cash flow. The government pays on really nice terms, so it kind of gives you some inflow of cash, some support for some of your research activity. Where ultimately the big carrot might be commercial,
Yeah.
but until you get there, working with the government on some of their activities can be just a nice source of capital that doesn't come with many strings. Right, the government's not going to take an equity position. They're not taking that position. They might want images, or they might want radio frequency data, or they might want some form of assured access to space in a different way. But it's so I think the governments have traditionally been a big player in space. I think that will continue. Commercial space, I think at some point will probably eclipse the government piece, but the government piece will always be there and be important. And I think particularly today, right now, as a startup company, ignoring the government would be a huge mistake.
Yeah. Yeah. We've talked a little bit yesterday and back in earlier events about the exit strategies of the VC backed companies, right? Most of them are looking either to go public or to be acquired by a Lockheed, Northrop, somebody like that. So, in those cases that have already happened with Lockheed making acquisitions, Boeing, um, are you seeing any reward for them in the immediate term? or is that activity too small so far to make an impact on the stock price of such a large company?
Yeah, so that's a good question. Generally, it's too small to make an impact on the stock price today. Lockheed's a great example, right? So Lockheed, I think of all the big, if you want to call them mega cap companies they follow, has had the most successful strategy working with smaller companies in innovative areas. I think any defense contractor that's listening to this would probably take issue with this comment, but it's true. They don't spend much of their own money on innovative R&D, right? So most of the R&D, if not all the R&D done at a Lockheed Martin or Northrop Grumman or a Raytheon Defense, Boeing Defense, pick your big contractor, more than the lion's share.
Yeah.
95% of it, 98% of it is government funded. So it's not really research, really, right? It's revenue generating research that generates margin. I mean, it's revenue research that generates margin. It's customer funded. It's what the customer wants. So for a big company to remain innovative and nimble and being able to bring in creative forces and ideas, I think it's an important way to do that. And I think Lockheed has pursued it really well. And if you look at Lockheed's financial results, this last quarter is a great example. They had some hiccups in some of their big programs, but they also took some positive gains on some of their investments. So is it benefiting Lockheed financially? For sure. It's a small peanut compared to the F-35, right? But it's a peanut going in the right direction, and it's also what do you want to call it? It's the seeds. It's the feedstock for future innovation at the company. So on multiple metrics, along different vectors, it's important.
Yeah, I hadn't previously thought a lot about the difference between true R&D and R&D that's paid sort of turnkey, right?
Well, I'll just say this because we're all taxpayers. What's fascinating is that's R&D that they can also deduct on their taxes because it's earmarked as R&D. So it's revenue that you can deduct. It's nice, right?
Sweet.
Get that.
Where do I buy stock? That sounds great. Let's zoom out. Well, first of all, when you talk to venture capitalists, they say things like, well, it's too late to invest in a launch company, right? And right now is the time to invest in remote sensing. And at some point, there'll be a denouement on remote sensing, and it'll be time to think about the next thing. How does that timing of things going out of fashion for VCs affect the entries into the public markets? How does that match up? And are there similar trends going on in the public?
And the public markets generally kind of lag the VCs, right?
Because of course, yeah.
Exit.
But how much? Yeah.
But the modalities are different, right? So if you look at, it's fascinating. If you look at let's compare three, young companies. You've got Astra, you've got Rocket Lab, and you've got Virgin Orbit. Different strategies, right? So Virgin Orbit's methodology is very different than Rocket Lab and Astra, and Rocket Lab and Astra are very different from each other. So there's in a broader question becomes, okay, so which strategy works better? I mean, maybe multiple strategies work, but you're seeing it's launch is not just a lot of times, and I take issue with this. You'll hear people say, "Oh, launch is launch." Not really. It's different, right? Different companies have a different way of doing it. So, and I think ultimately in the public markets, you'll see that kind of play itself out. Can they all survive? Probably not. But there'll be models that work out the best, and those are the ones that will be get rewarded by the market.
All right. Let's zoom out a little bit now and talk about the forecasts for the industry, just the sheer size of activity. $1 trillion, $3 trillion by 2040. Talk about how those numbers play into the analysis that you do, how much weight you give them, how much credence.
Yeah, I mean, it's when you kind of my experience in doing this sort of thing is when you look at a forecast that goes out 20 years, a lot of times the details could be wrong, but the magnitude might be right.
Yeah.
right? So, you see that just as an analogy, maybe a more mature analogy, Boeing will do their 20-year forecast and say, the market will be worth this much. They may not get the distribution of airplanes right, but they'll probably get the market size right. So, and I don't think it's all that different here, where, ultimately the market size will be probably not too far off what people are thinking. It's just the distribution of how that falls out in different businesses, when you go out 20 years from now, might be different than how people are thinking, because, there'll be synergies and effects and things that happen that, to most people, myself included, absolutely, you just can't imagine how it's all going to kind of come together, right? I mean, you can imagine, but then it comes together differently, right? There's the synergies that happen that you didn't think that would happen. But to get to those numbers, for sure, this is where the commercial piece becomes very important.
Yeah.
Government alone isn't going to drive that, right? So, government can be, a nice foundation, a nice support, but then the commercial activities really have to pay off. So if you look at a lot of the activities from, the constellations with, internet connectivity, the constellations on Earth observation, both optical, radio frequency, or whatever, and then other things that, that are just emerging. You look at the companies that are talking about, the ability to refuel satellites, move satellites around, the whole idea of tow trucks in space, and, the development of a true cislunar economy, an economy, spaceborne assets generating revenue in space, doing activities in space. We're not there yet, obviously, but it seems not that unreasonable to think that eventually that will happen.
Yeah.
To be blunt, I'm more bullish on what can happen in space than a lot of the stuff in, there's a lot of talk lately about, various forms of mobility. We'll be flying around like the Jetsons. That seems like more of a stretch than, what can actually happen in space, right? Because, to the choir here, given, what's happened with the reduction in launch costs, that just opens the door for people to experiment with businesses and different concepts and different ideas, right? So, I think it's, I'm actually very optimistic about what can happen. It's just, when you look out kind of medium, long term, exactly how it plays out, it's difficult to see.
Yeah, I was going to ask next about on-orbit servicing and sort of where's the window for that really to start happening? We've had a lot of speakers on this series talking about that, and haven't heard from an analyst sort of how you bake that into your numbers.
Yeah, well, it's I think, the reality is that, not like everything in life, it's always more complicated than sort of just the bullet point. Everything can't be a satellite the size of a shoebox, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you need big satellites, and if you can reduce the cost on that, and with, on orbit servicing, or the ability to move things around, I definitely think there's a market for that.
Yeah.
Most likely, for sure, like everything in this business, probably servicing government customers first,
Mm-hmm.
and then, commercial customers later. So it's something we think about. Absolutely.
Yeah. So you think that we could see activity there, real commercial activity there within, say, 2 years?
Maybe, yeah. I mean, it's hard to put a line in the sand, but,
Yeah.
so they
Yeah.
call it in 5, right? That's
Yeah.
fair.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then similar question, the bigger things, lunar mining, asteroid mining, do you put those at 10 years or 15 or 20 in your thought?
Yeah, it's I've always kind of, you know, have foundation for myself in sort of the areas I'm most familiar, right? So it's sort of like, all right, so when is China going to have a competitive commercial jet?
Yeah.
We've been talking about that for 20 years since I've been doing this, and it looks like it's maybe 5 years away.
Yeah.
I think it's sort of a similar thing. When will we be mining asteroids? I don't know, sometime in the next 20 years.
Yeah.
In my lifetime, for sure.
Yeah.
Maybe even in my working career, right? In 5 years, probably not.
All
Right. But,
right. That's optimistic. Thank you.
yeah. Yeah.
Same question on space-based solar. Have you seen any talk about that? Where
Yeah,
is it?
that honestly I'm less familiar with.
Yeah.
So it's harder for me to speak to that. I mean, you get at a high level, it seems like that would make sense, but I'm so far from the details on it. I don't want to like go in a direction I just really shouldn't talk about.
Yeah. um, at the macro level again, talk about some key sticking points that are holding the industry back. Um, what's tripping us up?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, it's not capital,
Right.
right? I mean, there's, usually it is, right? Capital is usually one of the biggest hurdles, right? So, it's not capital. I would say it's just execution, getting
Mhm.
things done, getting things out there, right? The more successes that you have, success begets success, right? So the more that particularly what would be bad is if one of the commercial companies that's publicly traded has something really bad happen, because that'll
Yeah.
be a really public forum to see that, right? So, and I'm not saying that's going to happen, but I think that's just something we just have to be cognizant of and have to be careful about, right? I mean, there's been a lot of hype and press around space tourism.
Mhm.
If one of those goes wrong, a lot of the public support and the good PR that brings could disappear in a flash,
Do
right? So I
you
think,
see that generating good PR?
yeah, I think so broadly, yeah,
Yeah.
you know,
Sometimes it's hard to tell on social media whether it's overall good or overall bad.
yeah. I mean, it makes the public aware of space,
Yeah.
right? And I think, broadly, if the public's aware of space, that you get more of a constituency for it.
Yeah. Um, with our last 2 minutes,
Sure.
you have done all sorts of things. You've been in the technical realm and now in the finance realm. Talk about why you went into aerospace in the first place and then why you switched from technical roles to teaching and then into finance.
Yeah. So I always was interested in things that fly. It was just that simple, right? Ever
Yeah.
since I was a little kid, I built model airplanes and I built flying model airplanes. I took some flying lessons. So I always had an interest in that. And just to be blunt, after I got my PhD, I got a job at a big aerospace company, and I got bored, right? So I mean, I was working on some specific stuff, and I wanted to be a person making bigger decisions around maybe what direction the company was going or what they were going to do. That's why I went back, got an MBA, and then I ended up in this business. I like interacting with students and teaching. That's why I do that. I still do that on different levels. But that's why I made the switch. I mean, I feel like in some ways from a career, I'm one of the luckiest people in the world because I get to follow an industry in depth that I'm genuinely interested in and have been my whole life. Where if I had the same role and I was following, consumer goods, it would be a whole different story. It would be work, for me now. Generally speaking, it's not so much work. It's a lot of fun.
Are you a pilot?
I do not have a license, but I have taken lessons, and it's something I would like to do. It's just the time commitment. That's the one downside of the current job I have. It takes a lot of time.
Yeah. Speaking of playing golf on Fridays, there's not enough time for any of that.
Yeah.
Ron, thank you so much for being here. We
Yeah.
appreciate your time.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you. Yeah.
All right. Our next speaker is Elia Montanari of the ESA, and he'll discuss the new space race and its benefits to the real economy. Mr. Montanari has been head of management and control in European Space Agency business applications since 2013. He is deeply involved in his charity Space Brains, where he aims to use space technologies to advance global education. Elia is also a qualified investor with numerous holdings in private equity funds, and he practices AI applications on a daily basis. Elia, thank you for being here.
All right, so I will. So basically, the first thing is a very short introduction from myself. Thank you very much, Lee, for having me here today. What I'm going to show you here, if the video runs as intended, is practically the life of an astronaut. And basically, my role at the European Space Agency, as I joke most of the time, and I have the opportunity to work here, and I'm very proud to work here, is counting people and money. So today, we're going to have a quick and short look on the incredible journeys that thanks also to my work, astronauts are capable to deliver. In this particular case, this is a collection of pictures from an Italian astronaut, a compatriot called Paolo Nespoli, that has done a numerous mission, in particular in collaboration with NASA. And this nice collection basically shows the life of an astronaut. What is basically visible from space is what is the Kármán line potentially, and these big cities at night, at day, and the International Space Station travels at incredible speed, that is 20 times practically the speed of a bullet, and basically are exposed at this incredible speed to these fantastic scenarios like this video of the Aurora Borealis. And now basically the idea is to go beyond, to go to Moon, Mars, and even beyond that. So this is an incredible experience that the astronauts are having. And if you're wondering why an administrator like me, Elia Montanari, is talking about it, is because I believe that also our type of work in counting money and providing the opportunities for having these sort of things are becoming real also for the investors and for the basically retail investors, so basically for everybody. So the idea behind this exploration, in my opinion, and this is a little bit how we got there. So it's a little bit of a story. When I joined the European Space Agency about 16 years ago, we were looking very skeptically at what Elon Musk was capable to do with his SpaceX and Falcon 9. Practically, the gentleman was exploding one of these Falcon 9 every 3 months. And the work that was going around with governments was very much big launchers with big payload and maximize that sort of business model. So today, Elon Musk is a reality, and what we are sort of experiencing, the way that we read this development, that this gentleman, Musk, but also Bezos, now the tech billionaires that are crowding now the space of NEWSPACE, have achieved incredible technology advancement, like the 2 boosters you see here landing straight. It was basically subject of movies not so many years ago. Now this has made has kind of started a little bit what we call the new space race, because we know a lot of what's happening in the West with Musk, Bezos, and so on. We know less what's happening in China. But the truth is that also China is incredibly capable. We have seen that they've landed a rover on the dark side of the moon, and they are capable. They've been capable also to land a rover on Mars, and we are more and more familiarizing to the numerous achievements that China is capable to deliver with data and observation satellites and communication satellites, and on top the meshing of what are different type of technologies into what is the classic space business model. So basically launching satellite and that's it. So it's becoming more of an intelligence type of work, including, for example, strategic type of intelligence that could be military or of other endeavor, right? So here we see the West, the East, and how do we get there? Somehow, when I discuss also with some of my colleagues, a little bit the idea of a commercial space, of a space that is no longer government premises, that's basically in a way I also represent, because also the European Space Agency represents the interests of 22 member states, is when this gentleman, that is Peter Diamandis, launched the X Prize, that then gave birth to what is today Virgin Galactic. And why not? Maybe also inspired other, the current tech billionaire to take their endeavor, launch things to space. So somehow it's a little bit of a Cambrian explosion of space, because now it becomes much cheaper for access space. This, this fact, right? I think actually we believe that from 10K, so $10,000 per kilogram of payload, of that payload, obviously, we already down of about one order of magnitude, so about 1K, and so the cost of access to space is lowering dramatically. And and I will quote again Elon Musk saying it should become as cheap as practically $1 per kilo. And that, I mean, will spark also some contentious, because if it is so cheap, basically to launch things in space, why do you have to actually move anything by road in a way, right? Then other things that have kind of pushed space into this direction is many efficiency. So in the past, and if you look everything that revolves around the development of a deep space project, I was involved, for example, in the solar orbiter, basically from beginning to the end. Everything that is built not to fail, with triple redundancy, and to last as much as possible, to the point that some of the missions that are still actually roaming around, like Herschel Planck, was built to last 2 years, it lasts 4. And so the idea instead is kind of moving into more consumeristic approach, and build cheap and fail quick, practically, and try many times. It's more the idea of the minimum viable product. And again, SpaceX and Starlink are mastering this sort of technique with their mega constellation. And these manufacturing efficiencies are not new. These sort of things are present in car manufacturing, for example. It was just some sort of knowledge transfer from an industry that was more kind of, let's do it perfect, to industry, let's give it a try. Other things have also happened, because now a lot of the data that maybe before were more type of military usage, intelligence, for attack, including also the GPS and stuff like that, is becoming a very useful resource for commercial activity, to understand where deliveries needs to be made. Shipments can be diverted actually on the course to, for example, from US to Europe, back to Asia or back to US, if the market kind of is capable to cut a better price. And many other activities are being monitored for space. And in particular, I want to add that today, in particular now that COP26 is ongoing in Glasgow, many of the commercial activities are also monitored for example, pollution. Methane spotters like GHGSat or the intelligence company Kairos are capable basically to spot from space leakage of methane and flaring of methane. So it's not only a commercial thing, but it takes care also of the planet and the people. And finally, yes, how did we get there? Again, China has become a global superpower, a global manufacturing superpower. And since 2015, they've expanded their technological capabilities, and they practically in 2018, they became the first nation to land on the far side of the moon, so the dark side of the moon. This was quite an achievement, and more spacefaring nations are appearing. Now, what's happening in the middle? Well, let's say that many things are happening in the middle. What I can bring in terms of European Space Agency that could be of interest is somehow the concept of the cosmic internet. So in fact, many missions are being staffed and resourced to the moon, Mars, and now we are thinking also beyond. Now, in order to go there, the idea is that, yes, you can do relay data through classic satellite, through the normal satellite with ground station located on Earth, and that takes a lot of time. Or you can start building also space internet infrastructure that we like to talk, to call space internet. That would actually allow faster communication, edge computing, optical communication as well, and much more reliable information. And so in that sense, the sort of dream or the vision that we are having is practically to bring Europe to Europa, and that is one of the moons of Jupiter. And the idea behind this is obviously because Europa has a lot of water, has a very large amount of water, and thanks to that amount of water, it could also enable future missions that could be return missions or also beyond Jupiter. And that's a little bit the idea behind. So this again is a sort of an infrastructure, and it serves the purpose of other missions that includes the space stations, include the moon missions, and include also the Mars missions. Now, I want also, in fact, to break a word about the collaboration. We say that we can go alone to go fast, or together to go far. It's and this is because, in particular, the accords that have been taken for Artemis have enabled a new push for what is also commercial exploitation of space. In fact, maybe it's not the right moment to kind of make a similar metaphor, but it's a little bit like the Far West. So the question is, who owns the material or whatever the riches that you have collected in space? So for that, there were the previous agreements that were totally insufficient. The Artemis Accord probably is not yet fully sufficient, but there are 13 signatories, including Ukraine, that signed late in November 2020. And these signatories are countries including US, UK, Italy, Japan, and many others that enable the legal framework that kind of say, okay, you can go there, you can do business outside, and we agree that if you actually mine things that are making you rich, or making people on Earth rich, you can keep them, you can exploit it. So there is a sort of agreement that this allows more collaboration and also much more entrepreneurship back into space. Now, one of the things that some people ask me, but why is ESA not represented here? It's because ESA is not actually government and doesn't have, let's say, that sort of executive power to sign an agreement for commercial exploitation. Nevertheless, we endorsed this Artemis Accord, and in fact, we will also work with NASA in order to participate to future missions. And then maybe a little bit of a kind of a review from what has happened back in Dubai at the International Astronautical Conference, and the IAC that just closed a couple of weeks ago. It's yes, there are many new spacefaring nations, including the Emirates. Nigeria was represented there, Brazil. So very, very many nations that you think is unexpected. Now, much of the work that I've seen there, by the way, is regarding the lunar exploration. And in fact, you see a couple of models here from iSpace. I'm not meant to do advertisement, obviously, of these models or their business model. But for example, there are other startups like Spartan Space that they were showcasing the inflatable module. And the picture that you see bottom right is basically the picture of our event that is the ACE Investor Forum, where we have brought 11 companies, so basically 11 space power startup in front of a group of about 60 investors for a collective raise of about $100 million, actually exceeding $100 million. And in particular, this gives a little bit also the tone of the new environment that space is currently experiencing, and in particular NEWSPACE, because today it is possible to do business in space. And also iSpace, that is a Japanese Luxembourg venture, they broadcast the opportunity to do business together, to do an ecosystem, and basically to work together in order basically to put together the forces and go further. Now, a few extra words on this space modern economy enabler. I want basically to give a few extra information of what we are doing at the ACE Investor Forum. The ACE Investor Forum is practically the venture arm of the European Space Agency. This, what you're seeing now, is a dashboard that we have put together for about the last 10 years, where many deals have occurred, about 270 with $500 million raised. As you can see also in the funnel that you see there, there are many more accelerated angel crowdfunding type of deals that are in the process of maturing and more become, the subject of investment from early venture capital and later stage venture capital. And the distribution that you see instead on the left is by country. We work obviously across the globe, but we focus on the member state, such as United Kingdom, Switzerland, France, Italy, Germany, and so on and so forth. This is really kind of giving a perspective of, how much and, how well the entire ecosystem is growing. The model is not much different from what is happening from US. We are not trying to replicate Silicon Valley. The idea is basically to make an ecosystem that is self-standing and also obviously exploit the benefits of such wealth like Silicon Valley has been capable to do. Maybe just a last word about the ACE Investor Forum that is about to happen. The last one was actually in Dubai. We are going to be in Oxford at the Divinity School. It's a very fancy place. Some scenes of the film of Harry Potter have been filmed there. There will be up to 10 companies pitching to investors that are coming from the city of London. That is not far, it's a short hop by train from London, and the QR code gives you access basically to the Eventbrite link that allows actually only in-person participation. I want to say it because I know much of the people that are present today are probably calling in from US, and nevertheless, if you think that you have additional business to be done in London, very welcome to participate also in there. And I have many other slides, but I'd like to stop here and give an opportunity, hopefully, to ask questions. And again, I apologize for this late appearance.
Wonderful slides that you chose to focus on, Elia, and we'll have to have you back to cover the rest. Just talk, we only have a few minutes. We want to get on to the next speaker, but just briefly talk about the distinction between space agency support and VC or public market or government support. How does that all fit together?
So the best way is, the way that we wish to happen is that is a continuum. Okay, that there is not much distinction. In fact, many of the work that we are also doing with the European Space Agency goes in co-funding mode.
Yeah. Okay.
So, yes, exactly. So, in fact, what we like to see in particular when we're talking about technology readiness level, and the idea is that the closer you are to market, so it goes from 1 to 10. So, at the later stage, let's say from 7 to 10. We like to see a co-funding that is generally 50%. Okay, So that's the sort of funding that ESA give. Cumulatively, what we have granted is an investment, but is in a sense, in a different sort of way. What we have granted, it exceeds $500 million over the last 10 years. And the ticket size goes from like 200K to several millions. That's the typical ticket size. Okay. And it's not so different from what NASA does, in particular, what is actually feasibility and demo type projects. Okay, but what we really like to see is that in the best case, these really come together. And in the other ways, basically, once ESA has basically primed and developed together with the company these solutions and services, we like to see them thriving through additional investment and obviously by attracting customers.
Thank you so much, Elia. We do have a request in the chat for you to include some of the links to the dashboard and to the event that you've shown here in the chat before you go. And you're welcome to stay with us through the rest of the programming. Thank you so much for being here.
Yes.
All right, our next speaker is Jim Thomas from Kirenaga, and he'll be speaking on investing in the final frontier. Jim is an entrepreneur, international speaker, and futurist thought leader. He's a partner at the venture capital firm Kirenaga. Their mission is dedicated to turning great ideas into world-changing businesses. Their motto is improving life on Earth, preparing for space. Prior to his role with Kirenaga, Jim served as the executive director of the Orlando Regional Chamber of Commerce and as the CEO of the Central Florida Tech Association. Through these endeavors, Jim was able to foster growth of business and the entrepreneurial community throughout the state of Florida. Jim also spent over 10 years working in government and politics at the local, state, and federal levels. During this time, he worked for the California State Senate, a Florida congressional member in Washington, D.C., and served as a campaign advisor for the United States Senate race. Jim sits on numerous boards and holds bachelor's and master's degrees in public policy from the University of Southern California. Jim, take it away.
Great to be with you this morning. Just love what you guys are doing and just happy to be able to participate. Let me see if I can successfully share my screen.
I'll let you know when we can see your slides.
Great, thank you.
They look beautiful.
They're coming through?
Oh, they were, but they've just, now we see your background instead.
Let me, oops. Let me see if I can get back here. One second. How about now?
No, we are still seeing your other monitor. There we go. It's a beautiful slide.
That work now?
Yes.
Great. I'm like they're real nice if you actually get to see them. So great to be with you today. I just love I love the topic guys are bringing to the forefront, and it's amazing that we are on the every time that we think that we've made advancements in these new areas, we realize we're actually just starting. It's really like we're just starting over. What I wanted to do was take a few minutes before we look into the future and look into investing in that final frontier. I wanted to take a few minutes to take a step back to talk about how we got here and certainly how I got here. And when people thought of, especially in the past handful of generations, when they thought of the next frontier, they often, there we go. This is not my family, but my family mostly immigrated from Europe, found themselves on the East Coast, and their final frontier was a place called And this is where they thought that they were going to, of course, strike it rich and participate in agriculture and do amazing things and invest in amazing things. And unfortunately, our history doesn't always go the way that we would like it to. And my grandparents, literally just 2 generations ago, grew up in the Depression and saw bread lines. They saw the Dust Bowl, and all of their kind of hopes and dreams that they could make in American Midwest really fell by the wayside. So they thought their next place that they would really set up shop was in the great state of California. But as so many migrants moved from the Midwest out to California, they weren't always met with the greatest of messages. And it was just a very difficult time, obviously around the world, but then in America as well. And as we look to what progress meant for them, obviously, they usually looked towards government and government programs. And FDR really provided a great, amazing vision, especially for them in the situation that they had come from. And they really began that mindset of, if you're going to do something meaningful for the planet and for people, that it really needed to be driven by the government. And we see these amazing shots. Obviously, it took government to get us to the moon, to do those big things historically. It took kings and queens. It took massive opportunity by government. And that really, as a kid, that really started to set in with me. They talked about what, business was just about making money. And, charities and nonprofits were just about helping, people at the, really struggling. But if you wanted to do something meaningful, you had to go into government. And that's exactly what I did. I said, we're not perfect, but if we're going to provide these needs for society, maybe it does come from government. And what we need is just the right philosophy and the right people. And unfortunately, as I traveled my journey through local, state, and federal government, what I kept seeing was the inequalities. Government couldn't fix what was going on in the market and vice versa. But I started to think, what if, as technology continued to grow, and as I didn't see the answers on the government side, I thought, what if we could use tech for good? And I think most of us on this call today grew up in a generation where we've seen that. We didn't have smartphones in our pockets. My grandparents were lucky to have a rotary phone when I was a kid staying with them. But what if we could see this exponential growth in technology and start to do something about this? And that really started to set in with me. But I wanted to leave, I wanted to really strike out and see something else in America besides California and the ecosystem that had developed there. And where I settled was Florida. And what I felt was there was an amazing amount going on in Florida. And most people, this is 10 plus years ago, really didn't see, they thought Florida was for vacationing. They didn't understand the university system here. They didn't see that really larger picture that I began to see. And as I became more acquainted with the ecosystem, it was just amazing to see that the talent that the region was putting forward and the talent that it was attracting and the intellectual property that were coming out of the schools around Southeast, of course, around the country and around the world. But it was just amazing. It was kind of a microcosm. I share this story because I think it is an amazing microcosm for where we are these days. And like you mentioned in the bio, I got to run a regional chamber of commerce and a regional tech association. And what I discovered was it was one of the most exciting regions. I almost too much credit here, but I fell upon this area that was becoming one of the great ecosystems of the country. But unfortunately, to push those ecosystems forward, we need capital. And people, there's a lot to be said for bootstrapping, but to get from ideation to commercialization, we really have to take a look at what that is. And what's interesting and what I found is people have these amazing ideas, and you guys might be familiar with this concept, but we really have to have a conversation around this, because this is where innovation too often stands around the country and around the world. I'm talking to friends across Asia and around, and especially around Europe, and they have amazing talent and have these amazing innovators. The capital doesn't meet those innovators at the right time to help them cross that chasm and to get to that early majority and to get to profitability. It all starts to fall apart. And what I wanted to make sure to share with this audience today is still in the United States. This is what the distribution of venture capital looks like. And this is a from 2016. This hasn't. And what I've found from participating in those ecosystems, and especially, the big names, that we know in venture capital, is, they are often, and nothing wrong with it, but they are chasing unicorns. They're trying to herd unicorns and replicate unicorns. But where we see innovation today, especially from my firm, Kirenaga, is it's really in that check size between 500,000 and 2 to 3 million. In many ecosystems, that's enough to get a very viable company into commercialization. But a lot of times that check size is just too small for those larger folks to pay attention to. But then when we talk to traditional investors, real estate, agriculture, just traditional, more conservative investors, and we start talking about innovation from an early tech perspective, they go, whoa, yeah, that's not my game. So we really see this disconnect between what is available and what we can do. And that's what was so exciting. I met these guys, Terry Berlin and Dave Scalzo, from they had started this venture firm up in the Northeast, based out of New York, and they were the same thing in California. And Terry luckily had taught nuclear engineering in Florida, and specifically in Orlando, and so he knew the talent pool, and he knew the opportunity set, and he knew how close Kennedy Space Center in Cape Canaveral was to this Central Florida ecosystem. So when I got to know them, I was president at the chamber, and just by default, these guys became my favorite in the Southeast, because they said that they wanted to put real money into real technology, but that was often pre-commercial, because people can't get to commercialization without real investment these days. So I, my job running a 501c6, anybody that I thought was really valid, I wanted to pass along to these guys and see what they could do with it. And they came back to me about 3 years ago, and they said that the thesis of getting in at an early stage in these revolutionary companies is exactly what they had seen and exactly what had happened. And they said, we want to triple down, our first fund is fully deployed. We want to triple down on a larger fund. And what we want to do is really wrap a space thesis around this. But when we talk about space, we're talking about clean water. We're talking about clean air, clean surfaces. We're talking about abundant food. Everything that we need, we're going to need some version of that as we go off Earth. And so I said, this is such a rich ecosystem. There's so many opportunities out there, especially in that, like I said, $500,000 to $3 million range. They said, do you think it'll work, and do you want to join us? And so at the end of 2019, we set out on this new fund. Of course, it was right before COVID. But as what we thought would happen is exactly what did happen. We had just we almost every day these days, we get massive people reaching out to us, not just in Florida, but really from around the country and around the world, because there's not enough pre-commercial capital that isn't also, valuing themselves in the $1 billion range. They're not looking for, early rounds of 40, 50, 60 million. They're looking for really just to keep, they're looking to keep the lights on. They're looking to make a few hires. They're looking to validate that technology, and they're looking to get it to market. And now once you do that, the later, the Series A and the Series B are a lot easier, because the pool of investors that you can reach into and have conversations around becomes much, much easier. So they, I have to take credit for this company, but in 2016, because Terry had a background in nuclear engineering, they came across a company called Violet Defense. And UV technology is certainly nothing new. I think it dates back to the mid 1800s, where we really started to harness the technology. But right here in Florida, a founder named Mark Nathan came up with an idea of putting a light with a transmissive lens to bring the energy footprint and the heat signature of UV down, and to be able to effectively spread UV around at a low cost. What was so interesting is pre-COVID, not that many people cared about talking about UV disinfection. We actually did get Violet Defense, or we actually got the Orlando Magic to license the technology. But what was amazing, as COVID came out, we were positioned to be able to share this technology with really the world. It was a difficult conversation before, and then all of a sudden, this company was just flooded with opportunities. What's interesting and how it relates to space is, and this is Terry, and those are the actual lights, but the UV technology behind it can be put in agriculture. And now with that low heat signature and that low energy, and with a light that isn't fragile, all of a sudden now we're starting conversations with folks like NASA to talk about off-world applications for growing plants in space. And so it's really exciting. I love that the conversations that we're having on a daily basis, and you said it in the intro, it's how do we make life better for people on the planet? How do we make Earth that sanctuary as we look towards technologies that we will be able to take to space? What's really exciting with us being in the backyard, I think we're the closest venture firm to NASA at Kennedy Space Center. This is technology that NASA developed years ago, because not for better or worse, for worse, before people really understood what toxins and PCBs were. A lot of the area around Cape Canaveral became contaminated with PCBs. And so they said, we have to do something about that. So NASA actually put millions of dollars and years into developing technology to actually extract toxins from the environment, instead of digging out a whole ecosystem and trying to, take those toxins just and dump them somewhere else. They said, well, what if we could actually just remove those toxins from the earth and pull them out? And that's exactly what EcoSpheres. NASA developed the technology, they put it into their tech transfer, and Serge Albino and his team were able to license that technology. And we were, from Kirenaga, we were very excited to support them, and we have ongoing projects with them today. And one of them is using that same technology, and now with Violet Defense's UV technology, actually do large-scale industrial water filtration. So just massive. So all of a sudden now we're talking about clean air and clean water. We're talking about clean surfaces, and now we're talking about abundant food, and how these technologies relate to off-world space environments. One of the other companies I wanted to mention, out of Embry-Riddle came a exciting drone technology we can do out of line of sight, where Census does out of line of sight drone data and critical infrastructure monitoring. And now they're talking about expanding into methane tracking. And so again, there's just, as far as making the planet a better space, here an early stage startup that was just in dire need of funding, but was obviously pre-revenue. We were able to get in there, elevate the technology, and now it's just, you know, it's amazing to see them take off the way that they are. Another company which is certainly worth mentioning is Stemrad, and this is Israeli-developed technology, first to protect doctors and medical professionals that are working in surgeries that involve radiation. And these the patient gets a minor exposure because the doctor working with this, really get a lot of exposure on a daily basis. And now, as we look, when they showed us the technology, they said we're already having a mindset of how do we help, physicians on the planet, but we could use this same suit to protect astronauts as they go to the space station and beyond. So we're really excited about this company. But again, if they didn't get that early stage capital, where would we be today? And one of the ones I love to talk about so much. If you haven't become familiar with Space Perspective, this is a company led by Jane Pointer and her husband Tabor McCullum. They were in Biosphere 2 in Arizona back in the mid-90s, and there was 8 of them in this large enclosure, trying to figure out if people could live within this biosphere. And as they tell the story, it's so exciting because they realized as they emerged from this building and they looked around the planet, they said, wait a minute, we're all in a biosphere, and it's called, spaceship and planet Earth. And so they had this idea of doing high altitude, traditional weather balloons, but they thought, what if we could take people, we could give them that astronaut overview effect. And if you read Frank White's book called The Overview Effect, every astronaut, at least that he's interviewed, and certainly anyone that I've talked to, they come back with a mindset. They were already doing such amazing work, but then they go up there and then you look back at the planet and you start to realize how small and how fragile the planet really is. And so Jane and Tabor had this idea: what if we could take, instead of rockets, instead of low Earth orbit, what if we could take people high enough without a rocket, and they could see the curvature of the Earth, and they could get that overview effect from this experience? And what you guys might have saw the other day, William Shatner went up on Blue Origin, and literally from launch to land, he was on that rocket for a little over 10 minutes. And he was up there at apogee for just 2 or 3 minutes. And he came back as a 90-year-old person who has thought about space probably his entire life. And he said, looking back at the planet was the most significant thing that he had ever done in his entire life. And to have somebody who's 90, say that, it really, to me, it made me feel great, because it really validated what Jane and Tabor are trying to do. But again, without the right investment at the right time, this project would literally never be able to take off. We helped them just finish a $40 million Series A. They're based right here outside the Space Center, and planning on launching. Now with this new investment, they're planning on launching in 2023. They already have over 500 pre-reservations, and the seats aren't cheap. 125,000 per seat. But as we see, how difficult space is, and we already have We have Blue. We have Virgin Galactic is back to the drawing board and trying to get their ship ready. We have Blue Origin trying to get to scale to take people up, but all of those flights are going to be hundreds of thousands. And we've seen the great work that SpaceX is doing, but as far as getting a lot of people up in the near term and to really allow them to have this experience and to have this experience with their family members or business colleagues, or however you could throw a birthday party at this elevation, you could get married up there. It's about that idea that grandparents could give this as a gift to their grandkids, and they would potentially carry that mindset of the connected humanity for the rest of their lives. And then when it comes to investment, it would be, we just have to mention Starship. And I'm sure this audience is so aware of what's going on in Boca Chica, the Starbucks with Elon. But I don't know if people are having enough conversation around how transformative, our smartphones allowed all of these other industries like Uber and Lyft and Airbnb, all of these transformative technologies were enabled from that smartphone that we carry around every day. And Starship and future, other companies as well, but particularly Starship, because I think it'll be the first fully reusable rocket. And still in the media today, they're talking about SLS versus Starship, and I think we have to have an honest conversation about SLS, if it is operational, is going to, I understand, be north of $1 billion a launch. And they're trying to get Starship down to under $10 million a launch. But as these types of developments move forward, just think of the space tourism, the space hotels, it's all of those massive industries that are going to take investment from the venture community and others are going to be available once this enabling technology is there. So that was the main the point I wanted to drive home today is we can't, there's so much opportunity just streaming out of our universities. There's so many people doing so many amazing things today. We really, we truly believe that, the greatest business challenges on the planet are the greatest business opportunities moving forward. And that's a quote from Peter Diamandis, but it just couldn't be truer. And the conversations that we from a venture firm are having on a daily basis, it's just mind-blowing what people are doing and what an amazing planet they'll create for us and with us if we're able to fund them at the right levels at the right time. And so we have to keep coming back and saying, how do we get more capital into more companies? How do we, we think our fund is a great vehicle for that, but we're just we're doing our small part. We have to think, how do we get more across the country and more literally around the world into the hands of these just brilliant founders, and we think venture capital is one of those great paths. And so with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Jim, fascinating talk. Thank you so much. I love that you brought specific examples of the companies and that you're sort of going two different directions. So you're taking NASA tech transfer and applying it to Earth, and then you're taking companies that have existing Earth technologies and applying them to space. So really interesting work and a creative approach there. I also think you have amazing graphics for some of those companies, really nicely done. Unfortunately, we won't have time for questions today, but we'll hopefully have you back another time.
All right.
And do a little more Q&A then. Thank you very much.
Yeah, no problem.
Tom.
Great being with you guys.
Sorry. Tom Olson has been the program director of the NEWSPACE Business Plan Competition since 2011. Over the last decade, the Business Plan Competition has awarded over $350,000 to deserving space-related early-stage companies. He is also the founder of the Center for Space Commerce and Finance, which is the sponsor, along with Foundation for the Future, of the Business Plan Competition. Michael Lane of Liftport is going to join us for the Q&A. And Tom, it's great to see you, and we're looking forward to February's event on this program.
Oh, Lee, thanks for having me again. Always our time is very, very short. No slides, just chat. That's what's going on here. We had planned to do something this month, and what happened was, to make a long story short, I mean, to tell the story fully, we would require a couple of hours and and probably a few drinks, which you would be buying. So I'm not really loath to tell it. But in the last couple of months there's been issues. Well, I guess half jokingly, I could say we had some supply chain problems. And so depending on your definition of supply chain, we're not talking physical goods, we're talking human resources and physical services and some logistics things that just went completely out of whack, because we also had something going on in parallel that was supposed to be our first live presentation in Dubai. And that didn't happen either. And that got pushed back to, mark your calendar because it's for real this time, September of 2022, next year, at the International Astronautical Congress in Paris. We're going to keep our pages open for signups for these events, and so that'll be available. And I'll find it a little later, or Michael can, the link to the sign up link. We're going to be updating a lot of content over the next couple of months. We're basically, in some cases, we're filling in on a lot of gaps I've noticed in our communications and the things we do on our website. And I want to make some vast improvements to that during what I think of as sort of a winter break. And while we're doing that, we've already got people coming in who want to sign up for the competition. And what we failed to mention is that Foundation for the Future is awarding $5,000 grand prize to the best finalist to make their pitch. Before we go on to questions, I have one little thing I want to do. It's I don't know if you heard about it, if anybody's told you about it today. I just got here, but it's a little surprise. I want to give you a little tease to February. There are a couple of companies that signed up, and we started putting them actually through the coaching session before we decided to push the event forward. And I invited them to come and do maybe a little guest elevator pitch for like 3 to 5 minutes. Isa from GeoJump wasn't able to make it today, but I see that Wael Khatib is here, and if he would like to unmute himself and maybe turn on his camera, I'll do that. Well, where'd you go? And there you are, Siri. Oh, thank you, young man, for showing up.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning to you. And just, I guess, take a couple of 3-5 minutes in a few short words. I'd like you to just introduce yourself, and especially introduce your company, which is called Virtual Satellites, and what they do. And again, this is kind of an introduction to the types of things you're going to be seeing in February.
Okay, thank you. Shall I share my screen?
We're not doing slides. If that's what you wanted to do, we're not. This is just kind of a chat. Make it like kind of an elevator pitch. What are you doing? Well, you're going to screen share. But okay, whatever. Okay, I see what you're doing. Just a couple of them. Okay, or have that one. That's fine. Go.
Okay, so in Virtual Satellites, we are developing a new technology. This technology, we call it virtual satellites because we are trying to make a communication channel between transmitter and receiver, as you can see, directly from transmitter and receiver without intermediate physical satellite in between. So how we can do that? Actually, we built our technology based on new discovery in photonics. They call it the array function and quantum entanglement, we are trying to utilize this new discovery, which is already discovered in 2020, to send signals from transmitter to receiver directly without intermediate physical satellite. So why this is so important? Because actually we can find a preventive solution for the issue of space junk, because we don't need that much of satellites for the next decade. As you can see, there are exponential increase in the number of satellites around Earth, which causes many problems for risk of collagen and light pollution. So, by the way, there are many organizations all over the world who are trying to find solution for the issue of space junk, like a corrective solution. What we are trying to do in virtual satellites, we are going in different approach. We are trying to find the preventive solution by finding another alternatives for the conventional satellite technology. So this is our team who are working in the group. Today with us, Ronald and Wa'ad, they are here today with us. So this is the basic concept of this technology that we are working on it. We are still in the early stage. We are working on the theory. We are looking for funding to try to testify this technology. This is the phases of our projects. We are now in phase 2. We are now like making the concept design for this technology. Let me just give you like a comparison between conventional and virtual satellites. Of course, it's more sustainable also in terms of latency, because we are working in low orbit. We are not going to use the 35,000 kilometer. We will go to low orbit. Also, it's for circular economy, we can utilize the same infrastructure we are using for normal satellites. We can just upgrade to virtual satellite. Also for coverage and cost, there are many benefits for this technology. We are trying to connect like the rural area. You know, there are more than 4 billion people in the world who are not yet connected with the internet. We are trying to cover Africa with internet, like inexpensive internet. So this is brief about our technology. These are the references that we rely on it in our technology. Thank you for listening. If you have any question.
Perfect. That's great. Well, thank you so much for doing it. That was a perfect teaser for what you're going to be seeing in February. That and some other great companies as well. Sounds like this is a very, very interesting project, and it's going to be fun to look forward actually to working with you in our coaching sessions later, which I'm going to talk about in a minute.
Thank you.
But thanks for doing it. Anybody have a question? We have time. We have a minute or two. We have a question for Whale. If anybody has one. Anybody? Bueller. Okay. Thanks, Whale. We're going to go on.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And we'll see. Will we talk to you soon?
Thank you.
I thought since we have the time, I'd talk a little bit since we don't ever get a chance to do this, and hopefully Michael will pitch in on this. Talk about our process, because as we like to say to our finalists, there's service after the sale, in which they sign up for the thing, but we don't just give them a platform and a podium and say go. We really take time and we with some of our great coaches, including I just saw that Kevin Russell's here. He's one of our welcome. Thank you. He's one of our great coaches, and it's been fun to work with him. I hope we'll get another chance to do it again in January.
Tom, I want to break in for a second. I think there's a lot of people that are new here, so I think you should back up a little and just talk about what the center does in general, and then be more specific about what we've been doing for the last year with the Foundation for the Future.
That's cool. Yeah, the Center for Space Commerce and Finance was actually founded about 5 years ago, mostly out of necessity. Well, some of the programs we were doing, like the NEWSPACE BPC, hi Eva, and NEWSPACE BPC and the Space Investment Summit series that we do, were done through the auspices of a single space advocacy organization, and we were a part of that. And they decided late at the end of 2015, they wanted to go in a different direction, and they kind of spun us out. And so what we decided to do we just let this thing go away, or do we do something? And so, and that's how the idea for the center took shape in 2016. And we did all the paperwork, and now we're an official Center for Space Commerce and Finance is an official 501c3 nonprofit. And so some of you will be getting an email from me for the end of the year, like you get from everybody else. I think you know what we're talking about, right? But we got to continue our programs with the NEWSPACE Business Plan Competition and the Space Investment Summit series. The Space Investment Summit, it really is specifically for companies and high net worth individuals who are either want to invest in space or curious about investing in space, and they want to find out what the opportunities are. We put on some great panels and guest speakers to kind of help educate them and push them along and encourage them to take that giant leap. These have been very successful in the past. We've been doing them off and on since 2007, actually. The last one we did in the real world was in Luxembourg, our first international event, which was in 2018. And we did another one here in the States in 2019. Those are the last, that was the business plan competitions for the last live events we were able to do. Because all 2020, every conference was basically rained out. And so just this year, just to kind of fast forward a little bit, I got approached by Michael, actually, who made the introduction to Tim Chrisman and Lee, and we had that discussion about trying to virtualize this thing. That's created somehow its own kind of challenges, because how do we do coaching? And that brings me back to, what are we doing to make this work? In the past, when we did a live event, what would happen is the finalists would all and the coaches would all, and guest speakers would show up like a day or so early, and we would do a full day boot camp. And they got to sit in and see presentations. They all got to practice their pitches in front of each other and every participating team was assigned a coach, and the coach would work with the teams during off breaks, and then they'd come back and practice their pitch again in front of everybody and get comments, and everybody got better. And sometimes it was amazingly better by showtime, when it had to go on stage and do the real thing in front of the coaches. 8 minutes to pitch, 8 minutes for Q&A, off the stage, next. It really sharpened them up, and I still get comments from people, even those who didn't win, years ago, who said, "Oh, thanks for doing this, because it really helped us do well, because now we've raised X amount of dollars from this other source." And in some cases, in a few cases, those people raised money as a result of somebody actually seeing them on one of these programs. So we have, we're figuring out our drill for doing it all in virtual world. And so the coaching is a little bit different, because that's basically a series of Zoom calls as well. Michael, you want to say something, please?
Yeah, I was gonna chime in with, even losing this competition is good for you, right? That we've had Spire Global just went public a few months ago. It has, I don't know, a war chest of about $400 million. They came through our program, 7 years ago? 2012? Okay, 2012, almost 10 years ago.
They basically came in third.
Yeah, right. Like not even in
the
money. Yeah, not even in the money. And yet here they are, fast forward, being a global powerhouse. So really it's been valuable for all the companies that come in, and it's a difficult competition. There's vetting and evaluation that happens long before anybody goes on screen or on stage. We screen out organizations that are not ready. We had somebody 2 months ago, 3 months ago, that wasn't even close to being ready. And the kindest thing we could do for that person was say that they're not ready, and then walk them through about what they could do to be better later. And I always really like that. Like it's we're not there to hold people's hands. We're not there to be a support group or a therapy group for them. We're there to help them build a better business in the space community. And just to see the results, good and bad, along the way, has been really powerful. Eva Jane Lark is one of our coaches. She just posted in the chat regarding about Spire. They were looking very different at a very different market, and they pivoted, and that's one of the reasons they became successful. So thanks a lot, Eva. Were you one of the coaches for Spire in those early days? I don't remember that. I don't remember who was which coaches were which, but it was really amazing.
I'd have to go through the records myself. I might write all this stuff down, but some of it's been so long ago.
Well, you figure it's we've been doing this for more than a decade, as Lee said in the intro. Eva's saying she can't unmute, but she was a judge, not a coach. So you were one of the people that gave them negative marks because they weren't ready. That's awesome. Good. With a 10+ year history and $350,000 of prize money awarded, we've seen that change companies in some really big ways. Tom, tell us a little bit about moments that were really interesting to you, like places or people, or I know there's a long list because it's competitors and it's judges and it's
it's
working
a
with
whole
NASA.
lot of things.
Yeah,
I'll tell you one amazing moment, but also one horrifying moment.
Okay.
And the horrifying moment, I'll lead off with that, because that was one of those years. I think it was 2012 again, where there was a lot of money on the line, and someone who's responsible for updating the website updated the foundation's website to list who the winner was, and that was supposed to go live after the awards dinner.
Oh,
well,
right.
When it was on a new web server that they put together, and this is like web services, networking 101. I mean, I was in IT for 31 years. And so what they did was, when they set up the web server, its default setting is Greenwich Mean Time. and so that announcement went out before the dinner. And so everybody already, all the participants, we had like 10 companies participate in that one that year. But they all already knew, and a whole bunch of other people in the room already knew who won. So it was no big surprise announcement. It was no big thing. There's no buildup. It was just all pretend at that point. And it ended up okay, and the sponsors were happy, which is always important. But that was a horrifying kind of glitch. My favorite moment was years later. I believe it was 2017. We were rebooting our program, and under the new center name, and it was at the New Worlds Conference in Austin.
Yeah, my favorite.
And we had another 7 or 8 really good teams, and we had some amazing judges. And the interesting thing was, because the names are escaping me now, but Highline Trust was still a big sponsor of this. Mm-hmm. And so Highline Trust was sponsored.
Highline Trust being Robert Heinlein's book empire, if you will, has been a supporter of the foundation for the Center for Space Commerce and Finance for years and years and years. And they have a really vested interest in promoting commercialization of space as their founder, as the financier was. So they've been really great sponsors.
So anyway, I always take executive privilege, and when the competition part is over and the judges go into caucus, I sit in. And we do have a formal piece of paper to start with that kind of rank the teams on this and that and the other. As I always tell them, I know these people are experienced investors. And so this is the beginning of the conversation, not by any means the end of it, because a lot of times they just go off script, and for very valid reasons. and say, yeah, we agree, this is the guy. Well, this thing was so tight, and I love moments like this because it's always my goal in life, to make life as hard for the judges as possible. And so what happened was there were two teams that were really, really, really good, that they really loved, and it was just, and one edged out the other by a little tiny bit. And so one of the judges stepped up, and says, I like this other team too, and I like them so much, I'm going to reach into my own pocket and fund a second first place prize. And that guy was Dylan Taylor, by the way.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. He's become a good friend since then. He's an amazing, amazing guy. I hope I can get him involved in being a judge sometime. That would be, because he is so busy. It's really hard to get a hold of him these days. But he did that. I was just, and to be able to announce
so
that.
2 first prizes then.
Or two, by the way, there are 2
awesome.
first prizes now. And the crowd erupted, I think I got my first standing O ever. I'll never get one of those again. But except at my retirement party, probably they'll all, everybody, there'll be great rejoicing.
Well, we only have a few minutes longer. Let's kind of look into the future. What does February look like? What are we looking for? Let's talk about criteria for the kinds of companies that we're looking for to submit to the application process.
Okay, yeah, there's a standard formula for that too. We're obviously looking for, quote, space companies that can take on multiple definitions. It's as we've always maintained, and I've always maintained in my life, this is not just about launch. Launch is only one tiny component of an entire space ecosystem that we have to develop industrially and with financing, and that's one of the reasons the center is in existence. We're explaining that approach. We've called it space scalable, and which means it's really a technology that was primarily designed to fulfill a terrestrial market, but we can see clearly could be scaled to solve a space problem as well when the opportunity, the market need finally arises. And in fact, one of the examples of that was the second winner in 2017. He had a medical instrument company, and he invented this device where you just blew into it. It was about the size of an old Walkman. You blew into it, and it gave you 10 medical tests. And for some reason, someone talked him into applying, and I looked at that thing and says, they need that on the ISS right now. So I encouraged him to take the program and get into it, and he was a co-winner, alongside a launch company that year. And but it's always exciting. I love to get those kinds of companies. And of course, there's the support services and other things in between, like the kind of service that Wael just showed us. That's typical. I call that kind of space-related type service. It's a ground support service. GeoJump is another company that's doing something along those lines in a very different way. And so we get all sorts of things that come in. And so basically, we're open to a lot of things. If you just, open your minds to it, don't be afraid to apply.
Yeah.
So no matter what you're doing, you never know.
There's so much. CubeCab was one of the competitors from many years ago. There, Adrian's on the call right now, and I'm gonna do a shout out to David Charon, specifically because he works with a lot of students that do business plan competitions for space ideas. So I'm gonna put a little bit of pressure on you, David, to bring some of those folks, and ask Adrian to resubmit. Right, there's a lot of stuff coming on. There's a lot of new ideas coming on the market soon. So.
Absolutely. I just want to, because we only have 3 minutes, we want to talk about the future.
Yep.
Okay, the future right now is February 15th. We're doing the next all virtual NEWSPACE business plan competition. And so we'll be spending January prepping for that. And then in February, we're going to do the show. We haven't talk to management at Foundation for the Future yet about future plans. We'll probably get there after this next event and talk about how many more they might want to do, if any, in 2022. But also I want to have that conversation to get everybody I know involved in potential sponsorships, in some way, or help in some way or another with our first global live stage event at the International Astronautical Congress in Paris, the end of September next year as well. And also in the pipeline, and Michael, you and I have talked about this, and we're going to do it some more. I really want to do it next year, is to have an all virtual space investment summit. We haven't done it in a while, and I really think it's time. And I think there's some great people that we know between us that would be incredible participants and speakers and panelists that we can put that together.
So the time frame for the business plan competition looks something like this: submit the business plan. It's a 3-page application, 2-page application, and a small short executive summary that gets you into the screening process. And then the folks at the Center for Space Commerce and Finance will review those. The top 6 or 8 bubble to the top. Those folks are then notified as semifinalists, and then there's a coaching process. There's 2 or 3, depending on how much time and how many coaches we have. There's 2 or 3 coaching sessions prior, and then it's showtime in February 15th. So you can kind of work backwards from that date. Okay. And how nice would it be to win a $5,000 prize, the day after Valentine's Day, right? So that would be a good thing to come home to your sweetheart with a check. So, and then in the development of the Space Investment Summit, let's talk a little bit about that. You only have a moment, but most folks on the call don't know what the Space Investment Summit is.
Okay, again, I explained it briefly a little bit. It's basically an event targeted towards space investors, or not space investors, but the investment community in general who have an interest in space. And it could be some well-heeled individuals or other people who know people who want to bring them and say, you should check this out. And we usually have a pretty good crew that comes in, but we have a series of keynote presentations and panel discussions on just about every aspect of space related, or even space scalable investing, and what that looks like, and what kind of returns you can expect, and what kind of time frame, and what the snapshot of what everything looks like right now. Yep. And that changes from year to year dramatically, and it's always an interesting and lively conversation, and everybody who participates in these things gets a lot out of it.
I remember some back in the world when we did things in person and in public, and it was that was a cocktail hour that just couldn't be beat. It was everybody's on the same page, trying to build a better world, putting money and capital behind these big ideas, and it was amazing. So thanks a lot, Tom. Really appreciate you being here. I'm going to turn it over to Lee. Thanks a lot, Lee.
Absolutely. Thanks so much. I have to go take a veteran to lunch now and thank him for his service in time for tomorrow, Veterans Day. So nice to see all of you, and we will reconvene in February.
Right on.
Thanks so much.
Thanks a lot, sir. Bye-bye.
That was so fun to hear those specific examples, the storytelling, the Dylan Taylor story, the Spire story, just fascinating stuff. So thank you for doing that. Charles Prael is a seasoned startup and financial professional who is the CFO and VP of sales for CubeCab company. With over 30 years of business experience, including numerous startups, Fortune 500s, and a dozen books out, he has a well-rounded and somewhat jaundiced view of the investment climate, and tries to bring an out-of-the-box approach to solving the problems inherent in making small-sat launch a going concern. Charles, the screen is yours.
Hi there.
Hi.
So I've actually got a little bit, some PowerPoint notes I'm gonna go through on this, just because it's easier to frame things for folks. but just for background for folks, I actually started in finance when I dropped out of college. I got dragooned into a gig writing books on finance that was basically, here's an MBA curriculum, we're going to stick it into books. And that was what
Yeah.
paid for my first degree. So, but so my job is the financial herder of cats. Okay, is the easiest way to put it. And so that's the perspective I'm going to bring to the table on this one. But I'm just going to kind of jump right into this for folks, and obviously questions on the back end. But if something really jumps out at you, go ahead and say so. All right, so let's start off with something. The gold rush is over, folks. If you look at history in general, every time you get an initial gold rush, there's a big first wave, and everybody kind of grabs what they can, and then it kind of fills up. And now you got to get down and do the actual work. We're at that stage. Okay. I'm not going to say launch is a dead world, but it is very saturated out there. There's a lot of really good ideas out there. I'm also going to be a little cynical here. Venture capitalists are probably not going to fund your deal. And the reason why I say that is that they all already have space companies in their portfolio. So back my first job out of college, I was the doc guy for a company called Argo Software, which basically invented the OLAP space. And the story I got from our CEO at the time was that he'd gone up to talk to Bill Gates and say, "Hey, we got this thing. We want you to fund it." And Bill looked at him and said, "Dude, I've got 7 databases. What do I need another one for?" And that is how Microsoft managed to completely miss the boat on multidimensional databases and OLAP, just by that one simple decision. And the reality is, a lot of the VCs that we've been talking to are saying the same thing. They've got a launch company. What do they need another one? It's not the same thing. So I've got one. If they want to have a space company, they probably already have it. So it's going to be really challenging to do something with that. Which doesn't mean there isn't money out there. It just means that you can't have it the easy way. Okay. One of the things I found is that naked tech isn't interesting. They want to have applications. What you're going to do with the tech is what really matters. Okay. So that's pay attention to that issue. You got to be able to demonstrate a path to profitability, maybe 2 or 3. Okay. Have backup plans, but know how you're going to make money. How is this thing going to pay for itself? How's it going to pay for its development costs? How's it going to make a profit? How is it going to make a viable company that people want to invest in? Know who your customers are. In fact, know who several different customer bases are and why they're interested in you. Okay. Most of you think about this, but put it down, write it down. Plan for scale. There's another point. Most people, I'm seeing a lot of stuff it's some really cool tech, and their idea of scale is, let me use an example. Launch. Our idea of scale is, hey, we can ramp up ultimately to maybe 1 launch a month. And SpaceX has already passed to a launch every couple of weeks. Our internal goals are on the north side of a launch a day. Okay. We want to be doing a launch every single day and actually be able to do multiple launches in a single day. Space insurance, just to give you an example on that, is moving from the field of art into statistical loss models, and they love statistical loss models. I had that talk with a couple of guys from Marsh Insurance out at the SmallSat conference in Logan, Utah, 3 years ago, and I told them what we were looking at, and they were salivating because they could actually get a statistical launch model and be able to balance their insurance costs on what's the math say, not, well, we think this is how it all works. So, okay, plan to get big and know what it looks like when you do get big. Be opportunistic. You are going to have interesting partnerships pop up in some really weird spaces, and I'm going to give you some examples on that in a few minutes. But be open to that, and because there's lots of opportunities out there. You got to reach out and grab them, but you got to be able to recognize them too. Look for the opportunity to do something interesting. Okay. If I said, hey, I can launch it, I can put a small sat in orbit for $250,000. That's cute. what do you do with it? Okay. Tell somebody an interesting story, have an interesting application. One of the other things I've noticed is that a lot of people want to own things. It's not just, hey, we can do this for you, but they want to actually be able to own what they're doing. Again, I'm going to give you some concrete examples towards the back end of this whole thing. Last big lesson here is don't be afraid of non-standard financing. And we're going to talk about that in a minute too. I'm going to give you some concrete places to go fishing. All right, let's talk about some projects we're working on really quick to illustrate a little bit of this. We're working on a national level private label LEO satellite internet system. This actually started out as a replacement for a television satellite. Somebody was going to put a $200 million satellite out of geosynchronous orbit to provide national level television. And the whole thing fell apart and they lost their investment. And I was asked, so how would you replace this? And I said, go with a LEO satellite with internet and then TV over IP and bypass the whole problem. Oh, well, that got enough interest that there was a national parliament that said, hey, we need to talk about this. Okay. We're looking at partnering them with a US Indian tribe. Kind of crazy, isn't it? Well, guess who has a real need for satellite-based internet? US Indian tribes all across the country. They have terrible connectivity issues and they need access to stuff just like everybody else. You remember what I said about ownership? Guess what? Our Eastern European client wants to own it and the Indian tribes really want to own their own assets. Okay. So being able to help them have that, there we go. That's what I was talking about unorthodox US funding sources. I'm going to give you a couple of pointers on that one in a little bit. We're looking at doing a private label BAMS, which is broad area marine surveillance for a country in the Middle East. And I'm not going to tell who, because that's being indiscreet. But the problem they've got is they have very bad visibility on their frontiers. They're at the middle of an international crossroads. They don't know what's going on their own shoreline. Okay. And they don't like that. And they really like to be able to know what the deal is. So we're going to help them fix that. All right. What else are we doing? We're doing defense-related applications. For those of you who don't think that things are potentially going to get really hot with China, and I'm just, I'm going to be straight up here. There's a lot of places in there that need help. Okay. And if you work on things that will help that happen for the U.S. Space Force and the U.S. Air Force and the U.S. Army and the U.S. Navy and even the U.S. Marine Corps, all of these services are interested in this stuff. There's things to do. Some of it's orbital capabilities, some of it's suborbital capabilities. We actually came up with a variant on our CubeCab 3A booster, which is, we call it the 3B, because we got asked by the US Navy, hey, how could we do a satellite launch off of an aircraft carrier? And we basically revised our design to be able to fit on an F-18 and launch from an F-18 on deployment anywhere in the world. Puts a satellite up, toot sweet. Well, guess what? If we can do it from an F-18, we can do it from almost any other fighter in the US inventory and most of the world's inventories, in fact. So, that one's on the shelf. We just finished a SBR phase 1 project and we are working on phase 2 on that. So that's some interesting contracting that's going on. And we are looking for partners for the orbital prime process. Okay. So if you got something interesting on the application side of things, we want to talk. Okay. So, that's a direct, please come talk with us. Adrian and I are both available. What else? So let's look at some opportunities in finance. Where's their money out there? Private equity firms that are focused on new generation space tech. Okay. Get away from the VC firms, but look at like hedge funds, PE funds, that kind of thing. Heck, if you got some spare time, put a PE fund together. I'm already talking with 2 different groups about that. And I'm actually, if somebody's really serious about that one, get a hold of me and I will roadmap you some tricks on that. Another one that people really should be paying attention to is the federal rural broadband package that just passed the US Congress as part of that whole infrastructure package. Folks, there's $65 billion in there. Okay. If you got something that will help with that, satellite-based internet, for example, guess what? They're going to throw money at you. Okay. And they're not going to throw it in small handfuls either. It's get out the shovel and they're going to shovel that money in your face because you need it. Another one, the Bank of FAF, Bank of Friends and Family. Now, this one's a trick. What most people think is you go hat in hand to your friends and say, hey, I need you to hand me $100,000 to finance my space project. Don't do it that way. You don't do it that way. So like I said, have your customers and your path to profitability laid out, nail that down. And, it's basically, it's a pitch deck. But the real trick with this is not, I want 100 grand. And I need you to write that out. Whatever it thinks is, I need you to write $100,000 out of your liquid assets. Okay. I'm about to give you a magic trick. Talk to them about, would you be willing to invest something from your retirement funds into this? Okay. You're looking at 401k money at this point. You're probably looking at, on an individual basis, maybe $25 to $50 million. Okay. Given the SEC rules on this, you could probably raise a kitty of anywhere from $20 to $50 million that way, if you had a big enough Rolodex or virtual Rolodex contact list. And the way you do it is have them roll the money from their 401k into a self-directed IRA. The self-directed IRA can then make the investment in your company or into a private equity fund. I've actually got, like I said, I've got 2 different groups that are looking at doing PE funds this way. That's one of their funding sources. Okay, so magic trick there. Most people don't pay any attention to that stuff, and yet it's a great way to help somebody diversify their portfolio. You're not asking for too big a bite, and it lets them do something really cool in space. All right, what else? Some obstacles you want to pay attention to. Don't underestimate your technical risk. Things are going to go wrong, and things are going to jump out at you out of nowhere. So just to give you a real world example here, one of the ones that just kind of bit us a little bit on the butt, caught me out by surprise, was we need a pressure suit. Turns out you can't buy those off the shelf, and I thought that was a simple, that was one of our, resolved items. Popped up out of nowhere, and I'm currently looking at a $750,000 bill on that one. It was like, where did this come from? So there's going to be things like that. Plan for it. Okay, plan ahead, plan for something going sideways. And like I said, things will go wrong, have a backup plan. Just remember, how many launches did it take SpaceX to get to their first working Falcon 1? It was like, what was it, 6 something like that, before they got a working one, and they were almost out of money. The reality is they went right to the wall on that one. It was they were either going to do it or the company was dead. Guess what? It happens. Plan for safety. Okay, and a lot of people do not do this or don't pay enough attention to this. The FAA's primary review criteria is about safety. Okay, so make sure that you're operating in a safe manner, make sure that you have a safe plan. Everything you're doing, pay attention to all that stuff. A successful mission is a safe mission. If you think you can fly an unsafe mission, even if you meet all your technical goals, guess what? You're dead. So, if your mission is safe, you're in the win zone there. Competition, don't estimate or ignore what's already out there. There's a lot of people doing a lot of interesting things in space. Okay. Just in the last week, I found 3 other companies that are taking a look at projects that are similar to what we're looking at. I find it interesting. We may wind up almost directly competing with Verizon. And I'm like, yep, and we will beat you into the mud. But there we go. People will also steal your ideas at the drop of the hat. So I'm gonna illustrate that for everybody right now. And I don't have the ability to check the hand raise thing. I'm hoping hand raises are turned on this. So how many of you have heard the phrase, "We want to be the FedEx of space launch"? Okay, so that's one. Tell you what, I'm going to pop out of this really quick. Let's not do it that way though. That worked. Okay. So everybody's heard we want to be the FedEx of space launch. I'll bet you don't know what it actually refers to. Okay. I know because I'm the guy who came up with it. You're welcome. I enjoy using it. But the basic idea there was that FedEx ships a simple package in a standard envelope. And yeah, I got the question there and I'll put it up in just a moment. And it's a standard envelope for a standard price. and they will get it anywhere in the world in 48 hours. Okay. They've got a simple price, they've got a simple packaging, they've got a standard size, and they've got great service. That was it. Everybody loves it, but it's like, but you don't know what it means. Here's another one. Here's another one that we came up with that got stolen. How many of you have heard the argument that there's actually two metrics for how much does space launch cost? There's how much is your dollars per kilo, and how much is the check you're writing? Again, that's one that we came up with, and about 3 years after I coined that one, it was really interesting watching a venture capitalist up on stage at a conference in Mountain View saying those exact words, and I'm like, thanks, dude, you stole it, but at least I own your brain. So, but you get my point. Okay. So there's a lot of stuff like that. Now, after this, I kind of was going to open it up for questions, because I wanted to help let people, here's a chance to ask questions and shoot stuff. So go for it.
Terrific, Charles. Thanks so much. Really interesting slides. There was a lot there. If there are questions, please post them in the chat, but I'm going to ask a few here. You were talking earlier about when we were talked a couple months ago, 2 months ago, we were talking about the FedEx of space and how that's an aspirational goal, but no one is really that close to achieving that. So talk about, what does it really mean to become the FedEx of space? What would it take? What would it take?
So our plan on that one, this is just our internal plan.
Yeah.
Is we want to get down to 30 days contract to launch. 30
days contract to launch.
Yeah.
Now, all right. So put that in perspective. What's it like right now? I have a box. I want a CubeSat to go to space. What's it look like right now by comparison?
Okay.
Just across in the industry.
Assuming you're on a commercial customer here. So that's, I'm going to preface that with that.
Because if you're not, you're with NASA or the Air Force, and that's a 7 month to 2 year process if you're manifested at all, and if there's support and capital that's budgeted by Congress. Yes. So we're going commercial. Good.
Going commercial right now. The shortest lead time I know from anybody who's actually launching is over 18 months.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So the best deal you can get is a year and a half from now, after having spent about $9 million, your satellite will go up.
Yep.
Okay. Like I said, our goal, once we've got it, we've got a few things to finish here, I'm not going to say otherwise, is you come to us with your satellite, with your FCC paperwork, which is really important, with your balance checks, so you've already done a balance check and all the rest of that on your satellite. You know that it's nice and stable, and your package, and your paperwork package. Okay. And 30 days later, you're on orbit.
Right.
Okay.
I mean,
we're actually looking.
That's amazing.
No, that's not amazing. Let me give you amazing.
Okay.
We've actually been asked by a couple of different folks, and this is mostly at the governmental level at this point, but I think it's going to peter over to the commercial side of what about contingent launch capabilities, really snap kick launch capabilities. And there were a couple of specific missions in question. The shortest time frame we had for one on a pre-generated mission profile, without having to go through the approvals, because it's a military mission, so they own their approvals issues, was 18 hours from the go.
Wow.
So, it was 18 hours from go to birds at the end of our planes at the end of the runway taking off to launch your satellite. That's overnight delivery.
Gosh, it was probably 2004, maybe 2005. I was on a March Storm mission with a bunch of the ProSpace people, and they're knocking on congressional offices and talking to staffers and Congress folks. and we're like, the world needs, the United States needs an operational responsive capability. And no one had any idea what we were talking about. So to get from there to here is pretty remarkable.
So let me tell you a little story on this one. So you remember the DARPA responsive launch competition a couple 2 years ago? So we were part of that. And we were looking at, we weren't sure how big of a geographic swing they were going to do on their launch. Okay, so let's preface that by saying that. And I think, as I recall, they wound up saying the first one was going to be in Alaska, and then you had a week to shift elsewhere.
Right.
What we were thinking was, just as a hypothetical, let's say that the first launch was out of the Cape, and then the second one was a shift up the coast, and you had to do the second one from Wallops. And we figured, they'd probably give everybody, a week to shift and then do the launch. So it's a relatively short shift, but it's a shift, and it demonstrates the ability.
Yep.
We were looking at that, and I kind of gamed it out and said, so what if we do the launch from the Cape? As soon as the plane takes off, the ground support team packs all their stuff into a couple of containers, jumps in the trucks and stuff, hauls balls up to Wallops, and the plane recovers directly to Wallops.
That would be awesome.
And they're like, okay. And
right.
Okay. So I figured, and we've got a second launch vehicle in the can with the convoy. So it goes there, plane recovers, refuels, gets reloaded, and we fly the second launch in the same day. And probably if we can do that, because the plane's going to recover back to the Cape at the end of that, that's home base. Our launch plane will get to do a barrel roll over the teams that are still loading out from doing their first launch. Because we're done, baby. What about the rest of you?
We're done. Checkbox. Thanks. Move on. Yeah.
That's nice. All right. That's our concept of responsive launch.
That's the way the world is supposed to be, right? That's what we're all kind of working for. The infrastructure we're trying to build out. That's what we want to accomplish. Let's go back. You had some pretty interesting finance ideas there. I particularly liked, and I'm particularly sensitive to the American Indian indigenous tribes issue. I live in Washington State. There's tribes all over the place. I don't talk about it very much, but my genetic heritage is Panamanian Indian. Yeah, I know, surprise. But I've been aware of that. They talk about last mile coverage, but a big tribe, a big reservation in Arizona, Utah, Montana. I mean, some of those tribes are bigger than some European nations. I mean, really, truly, like on a square footage basis, right? And they're in the middle of nowhere, which is part of what happened to the American tribe system. And it's an endless last mile connectivity problem. So talk about how that might come together. And by the way, I live in Tacoma. Tacoma has an indigenous tribe in our city. It's actually a part of our city map. And some tribes are reasonably wealthy. So they have their own financing capabilities. So talk about that. What does that look like to you?
Well, okay. So let's start off with, about my wife. Actually, let me begin from the beginning. My wife is part Athabascan Indian. She's part of the Doyon Tribal Corporation up in Alaska. So, so that was my introduction to that whole thing about 25 years ago. Subsequent to that, I've had talks. I actually had a talk with a guy down in Oklahoma who was asking me what kind of interesting development projects I have. And at the time we weren't looking at this one. So I didn't talk to him about it. We're in the middle of relighting that conversation, but he had asked me, these tribes have all this casino money and they want to invest it in something other than gaming. Yeah. What do you got? Because they're looking for something useful to do with it. So there's that one. The other thing is, to be quite honest, tribes and tribal corporations, they can tap into all that federal money I was talking about. And they are the poster children for rural broadband problems.
Yeah.
Okay. A friend of mine, just to give an example, flies medevac out of the Four Corners for the Navajo tribes. and it is bad out there. It's really bad. So the thing is, where you've got tribes that already have funding sources, like the casino tribes, they're looking for places to put that money other than back into casinos. Okay, they want something that's going to generate jobs, that's going to generate education, that's going to generate benefits.
Well, there's also an upskilling economic development component to it as well, right? So
Well, that's what I mean.
Imagine a world where you are designing satellites in the Four Corners region, right?
Yes.
Right.
Not just designing, but producing them.
Right.
Okay, you're doing the production for all of this stuff. The Oklahoma tribes, great example. What do you think the world would look like if they're producing multiple lines of high def concepts? Why? Because they're flying them.
Right.
Okay. What do you do in a world where the biggest pool of experienced satellite operators, by head count, is the Indian tribes?
Yeah. Yeah.
What? You're going to them for expertise, not the other way around.
The United Arab Emirates is making a big bet. I wouldn't say gamble anymore. It was a gamble, but they're making a big bet on focusing on Mars. But everything about that mission is about upskilling their citizenry, right? And so if you take that same philosophy, apply it to the indigenous peoples, and this is true for the United States, but it's also true for Canada, right? Giant pieces of real estate,
Yep.
Populations that have historically been underserved, and enough wealth and enough human capital and financial capital to make these transitions. So it's pretty powerful. I was really glad to see that in your slide. What's the Middle East? Eastern Europe component. Can you talk a little bit about that? Like, what's that partnership look like?
So that one, what I'm looking at is, so both of these countries, this Eastern European country and the Alaskan tribe, I'm looking at the Alaskan tribes in particular. We're both looking at a polar orbit.
Okay.
And it turns out, if you look at the map, that the backhaul for one orbit is over the other's territory.
Oh, nice.
All right. So it's like, why not partner the two of them, build one satellite constellation, use it half the time to service the Eastern European stuff, use it the other half of the time to service like Alaska. And then anything beyond that you get is gravy. And if you actually check the orbital tracks, there's a fair amount of very profitable gravy there. That's
good. That's good gravy.
For example, one of the down tracks on that one is all of Eastern Africa and the seaboard thereof. Okay. So
yep.
Yeah. Now here, let me give you an interesting little scenario.
I'm building a mental map in my head here. Okay.
One of the demonstrators we're looking at, we fly the whole thing. We want to be able to demonstrate, hey, you can take this anywhere and it's really effective. So how would you like to be able to do, in the space of a week, a web conference over that from Tahiti, a web conference from the geographic South Pole, and a web conference from the top of Mount Kilimanjaro, all on the same backbone, using a tablet?
That's pretty neat. That's a good future. I like that future.
That's the future we want to help these folks build. And the cool part is, we're going to help them, but they're going to own it and they're going to build it.
And then the financing of something like that becomes complicated. And I know that Leah's coming on to kick us off. So can you talk a little bit about the financing, or is that a little sensitive at this point?
It's a little sensitive. I'll tell you, I've dropped some hints in the slide deck.
Are you going to post the slide deck? Because I didn't memorize it. I was just paying attention.
I will email it over to you.
Okay. All right. Great.
But there's some pieces in there. And honestly, if somebody's got a question, just reach out and ask, and I'll be happy to talk about it.
Adrian put your links in the chat. So definitely, if you want to follow up with that, please pass a message over to them. Charles, Adrian, really great having y'all here. Thanks for being a part of this. We got to switch it over to Lee. Thanks. Have a great day, y'all.
It's been awesome. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
We like treasure hunting. That was great. Thank you so much. This next segment is an interview with our executive director and former intelligence officer with the CIA and Army, Tim Chrisman, and he'll be interviewing Goncalo Esteves. Goncalo is an innovative business process and systems thinking professional in space and business process management. Obsessed with space exploration and human spaceflight, and doing his pathway to becoming an astronaut. NASA Break the Ice Challenge. He was a runner-up awardee of the World Design Organization and International Space Station Business Team. He's the Space Mission Assurance Process subject matter expert for AIAA, as well as a Space Operations Technical Support Group Commercial Vice Chair. He's going to speak about the power of will, work, and near impossible things, having space as the domain for realizing the best societal growth. Goncalo and Tim, take it away.
Thanks, Lee. Great to have you here, Goncalo. I can't hear you very well. Is it just me?
Very well. Let's confirm here the settings, and this should be.
Do you have an alternative microphone possibility?
That's what try this one now. It should work. Tim. Hello.
Little better. It's still pretty echoey and vibrating.
Okay, so let me move here to the. What about this one?
Perfect.
Okay, we found the right setting.
There we go. Yeah, welcome. I'm excited to have you here and be talking with you. I always like to start these interviews by asking sort of why space. When I look through your resume, it starts with human kinetics research. And now, fast forward 20 years, you're a space evangelist and really getting this message out there that space can be for everyone. So like, walk us through that. How did that happen?
Well, like many dreams, they come in phases, but they start with something, okay?
Yeah.
And I do remember this. I'm from the generation of Carl Sagan, okay? And I've seen spaceship Earth, and I've seen images of landing on the moon, but my thing was, I want to be an astronaut. Yeah. And this came up as I was a kid. I'm from Portugal, and later on, I discovered that my country did not have a space program, and really only America did that. And kind of, those things went into the back, and I started doing other things. Later on, after a dream to come to America from my family, we got to America, and I got hired to do this. I do large-scale corporate transformations. And one day my son asked me, what do you want to do when you grow up? Man, I was leading a very pretty interesting project in terms of company overall digital transformation. And I couldn't answer, I'm a grown-up man, I think, and I couldn't answer. I was doing digital transformation. What the heck is this? What does that, what the heck does that bring to educating someone or providing direction or providing good in the world? And I said, no, it's time to go back to the dream. And I said, I want to be an astronaut. And in the meantime, since I'm doing process management, industrial revolution, okay, I will bring the US space economy up because I don't have yet $50 million yet. Although having $50 million looks too simple, you have a metric, you have a value, go there, 6 minutes and they come back. Too easy thing. So I said, at the same time, I'll use my capabilities to build up the ecosystem of space and provide space access to all, because they can see that if I can do it, others can, and this will become much more interesting. So that's the reason why space. I couldn't answer a question.
Yeah. No, and it's often questions from our kids that hit us the hardest when we realize, oh man, I really don't know.
Yes, so that was what hit me, to be fair.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And it's a story that is becoming more and more common in the space community. It's no longer just, oh, I got a physics degree, I'm a rocket engineer. It really is, we're at a point when your kids ask, why aren't you an astronaut? And you say, I don't know, I guess I will be. And you can. Like, that is now an option.
Yeah, and I have to rephrase the dream a couple of times. Rephrase, redo.
Yeah.
Because I know the path is big, but it's moving. And I do have a plan, The plan has been working for quite some time, and I have some tools and instruments and projects that started happening. Because you don't arrive. I arrived at the US fully confident that I would find a job in here. I had opened up a gigantic factory in Brazil, working for Jago and Rover, and I was like, I've been business process management, automotive, high top skill consultant. Of course I can find a job. You know what? Nothing. I was like, am I speaking to the walls in the US? This is the place of the dream. And it's like process resiliency, systems thinking, whatever, And then finally, after 768 emails and many hundreds of hours, I found a job, and then career moved in a different direction. So things do change.
Oh, for sure. And I think that's one of the coolest things to hear about is how those journeys progress and how one thing builds on another, where we're at now, turns out it's not that we wasted time. We were just practicing what we needed. Yeah. So what is it now that you're working on with space? You said you have your plan to get you to space, but
so the plan is this. I already started my own company, helping other small to medium space companies. Because if we pick up the NCIS code of the companies that do space below 1,000 employees, there are a lot of companies that drive the economy in the US, a lot of them. And I'm from the 2021 cohort of the Commercial Space Studies program between FIT and the International Space University. And Andrew Aldrin and Greg Otring, the experience. The experience was awesome, outstanding, and I did. There was one time that I had to defend not the national team, not SpaceX, but the other team, Dynetics. I did a graph on how many suppliers did that proposal touch. I'm not talking about the engineering side. I made a graph on all the suppliers that proposal touched, all the amount of dollars and the speed of money. And I was like, I need to defend. This will be my case. I will take care of engineering. And then I understood that all of these methods that allow the space economy and the entrepreneurs and founders to be way better can ramp up the US economy, the US space jobs, and so I'm working on that. I've got my own consulting company, as well as I maintain my director level at BPMD. That's a niche company. And I'm advising other space companies on process management and business models. The idea is this. It's very simple. I will help design, test, build, and I'll fly it, because that's the last, and come back safe. Okay, so that's the path. That's what I'm doing right now, and going through all the phases, Tim. Acquiring customers, spreading up the message, maintaining content out there regarding space. Looking at the work that you guys do, and I still publish every month, as you know, the numbers on space jobs.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and And that was the thing that led me to do the Break the Ice Challenge. That if you want to talk about that later, I can tell you the odds of doing something impossible and how did I calculated them.
Yeah, no, let's jump right into that.
Okay, so let me share my screen with you guys because I'll tell you a story that I find that it's very, very interesting, okay? Here. This one. I think you can see an Excel. It's a boring Excel, okay? But I think you'll enjoy it. So in 2019, I said I want to go to space. That's it. I need to do something in space. And prior to that, I always had this passion to work with people in the industry, either in COSI, International Council of Systems Engineering, or where people will join and share things. And I sent 175 emails for everyone in the support group saying, I've got these characteristics, I want to work in space, I'll do whatever you want. It doesn't matter. 2% replied, okay? Two person said, yes, it's okay. We have, you can write some, minutes of the meetings and okay, fine, let's do that. Later on, I became at the Space Operations Technical Support Group, their commercial space lead, and I helped organize our online conference, and it was just fantastic. I brought people from the Lunar Surface Interface Consortium, John Guidi from NASA. Fantastic. But this started by writing memos, okay?
Yeah.
So two people responded, and that's kind of a 1% chance, okay? That kind of built up a bit of the curriculum. Then I attended all possible space workshops, okay? All of them. They were free. I met Captain Stephen Rickey, and I attended all of them. And I started following up with people. What do they want? What are the things that we need? Let's say that we had, in this case, I had, 3 folks that said yes, and that's a 2% chance. So since one event and the other, I kind of, one follows up the other, you need to multiply it. So it's a 0.020. It's almost neglecting, okay?
Yeah.
And because of that, I followed up with Clive Neal and I said, NASA is coming up with this challenge. We should do this, this, and this. What do you think? And then Clive Neal brought Paul Van Zuzanti, that's from Michigan Technological University, and then brought Honeybee Robotics with Hunter to give the tooling. I was doing parts of systems engineering program management. And guys, after 530 hours, that thing in there that doesn't exist became the runner-up award. So that's one of the stories, okay?
Yeah.
That worked. These guys are awesome. These are Paul Van Zuzanti has one of the best systems engineering processes I've ever seen. Fantastic. Their Michigan Tech is outstanding. And prior to that, we can talk about the International Space Station National Lab, because I've been involved in trying to reduce cycle time from 3 years to 6 months or to 6 days. So it's been, yes. Again, same thing. I applied for the ISS, for the World Design Organization business team. Big clash between lean systems thinking, design thinking, but overall, something very important, and I think, Tim, you bring this up, extremely diverse teams. And I know, because I talk with an accent. I don't wear the same shirt as the other person. I believe in different things. I come from another country. I have a different skin color. I have different things.
Yeah.
But teams, as I've seen in the past, perform way better if they are more diverse. And they are,
agreed.
Yep. And that's been one of my major challenges, because space is very.
They look like me. Old white guy with a beard. Yeah.
Space is hard by definition, we know that, but it's hard because the mental models and the diversity around it, it's not yet there, man. It's
right.
hard.
No, agreed.
So this was fantastic. I kind of felt like I was in Jaguar Land Rover. I had people from India, China. I said the word China, okay. India, China. I had people from India, China, UK, US. Fantastic. People working all around the clock because we hold all the time zones. how our projects should be run with different methodologies as well. So, and we did provide good recommendations for Congress to later on, if the ISS wants to use them, to move their cycle time from 3 years to 6 months or less, and decreasing their overall. It's $5 billion, guys. 50%. It's U.S. money that's going there, and there is no business problem that waits 3 years to be solved. It doesn't exist.
It's true.
Even in science. So the recommendations are out there. It was fantastic because for the first time as a process person, I could model what astronauts do at the space station. So I felt a bit more of astronaut. It's one more step.
Yeah.
So these were two things that, they all start with very slim chances. But if you say, okay, these are my questions always. What do I want? What do the others want? What do they want? What do we make of space? Because it needs to have that common sharing thing. If, for example, you and I wouldn't share the same goal and the same will of space, this wouldn't be a conversation. This would be like a finance team or something like that.
Right.
What are the gaps that I truly believe I can close? Even if, team, and you've been very inspiring with your newsletters, and I know that you work a lot alone, man. That's really that's really fantastic. The amount of no's that you keep on receiving, it's just, we need to wave, and say thanks.
Yeah. Oh, great.
What can I learn? That's always an important thing. And what can I truly give that no one can stop? And I think I've got my own capabilities, my own superpowers in a way that no one can stop. And I will not be, this is an unstoppable force to making sure we have better space capabilities. So that's kind of what I want to, okay, I want to share a couple more of other things.
Yeah.
It's important in a way that independent of our personality, and it's what I've seen, for us to get out there and LinkedIn. And I owe this to Xenia and their course. It's a course on space image, or she can talk about that better, but I moved from 2,100 contacts to 3, okay, with this. Yes, I did produce 112 space videos on my YouTube channel, and that requires, everyday work, commitment, and editing and learning new things. And of course, the commercial space program for me was a big boost in terms of knowing people and 15 days of internship at the Kennedy Space Center. And in people, I've been relying a lot on meeting people. Captain Stephen Rickey, I think you know him, has been outstanding. He has a huge passion for space and helps a lot. John Spencer is my mentor. I call him every month, say, hey, John. Yeah. And I don't know, you are building these space cruise ships, and I'm all entangled. I don't know if I should talk with these guys or this. What do you think?
Yeah.
And then I've got people that don't agree with each other. Okay. And I love to see their different points of views, and they help.
Right.
Extremely helpful. From Jose, Otavio Christian, fantastic view from.
Oh, I love, yeah. Great guy.
Then Greg Autry, that is always like, you should do this, move me that. Always change. Andy, that helped me a lot at the course, and Andrew Nelson, that came from a great experience in space. So these have been my tools, okay? And of course, I've been doing the technical side of space, but I'm talking about the folks that want to move into space. And if you follow, guys, don't believe the odds, or believe the odds. It's definitely a decision. So I wanted to stop in here. I pounced you with data and ways of working and things. And any questions, I'll be happy to have.
No, and I think what you're saying is important, that, success is moving from one failure to another without losing momentum. And so, you sent hundreds of emails and met hundreds of people before you ever got to yes. And so the message to people trying to come in to the space community is, the next email might be the one. Just keep going.
Yes, and I can tell you that today I received one email that I wasn't expecting. That's part of life.
Yeah.
I was expecting something, and you receive another. You get like, What can I do? I know what else can I do. I'm gonna pound you with 15 more. I'm gonna do more of that. Because one thing I've understood, and looking also at your work, is that if you keep on doing the work in a constant basis with quality and with belief, it will work. The people that come into our lives, they don't come in just because of this or that. They come in because you've done the work and at the right time. And this the same thing applies for companies. So some of the people that I've met when I worked at waste management back in Portugal, doing things that no one likes it, are I learned a lot about them. They are important in my life. My family is important in my life. But what I'm saying is that there will be many no's every day. But if you believe that they believe in work, it's not like you don't sit in here in my bouncing ball and you believe in work. You believe, you work, you meet people, you listen to them, and you write down the things that you truly believe. Truly, like I know that I'm going to be an astronaut, but to do that, I need to design, build, test, and fly.
Yeah.
So those things should work.
Yeah, no, I agreed. And that process of going through and defining, not just what you want, but what comes after that. Good intentions are great, but they don't get you anywhere. And so whatever the process is, go through it. I mean, Michael Lane's got a great Numenia process that he takes companies and people through. Fantastic. What you're talking about is another. And I mean, the process is what helps. It keeps us honest. So that's cool. But what's next for you? So, you're out there, you're making waves and delivering a message, but what's coming?
Yeah, what's coming is that between, I would say, November, December, and January, I continue with my consulting company and continue advising, or B, I move to a space company where we can build things. And there is a big challenge in all of this. Two challenges. One, no one knows how to industrialize space. No one knows. I've talked with Blue Origin, SpaceX, folks from there. Everyone is hitting with their heads on the wall. How are we going to make these as an automotive machine?
Yeah.
No one knows. And then the other part comes in as, but we don't have a market. We don't have a business model. And there are these two competing versions that we don't do it or we cannot get there because we don't have enough market. I would say that the market is developing itself. You can see it decoding. And the other thing, the guys that built Instagram, they had no idea of the business model. They have no idea of what that thing would mean. The moment we will have satellites on orbit in a daily basis or humans on orbit in a daily basis, the markets will appear because they do appear. Yeah. We have proof of that. If you look into the work of freedom of how innovation works by Matt Ridley, it's clear. And I know the folks from economics, and I'm an ex-PhD student from large-scale simulation in economics, so we can do whatever you want. The markets appear. The markets do appear. Sometimes they are late, but it's known that with the convergence of freedom, of technology and investment at the same time, freedom is important in here. Okay, really important.
Oh, yeah.
With the convergence of these things and some non-political advice or regulation, markets do appear. And that's the key message from that book that companies do need to pick up in their innovation processes. So I do believe that as we become more free to launch, and I know, I have got the Part 450 of FAA all written down and devised and planned to become more efficient. But I truly believe the more we have market up there, the more market will come in, and everyone is lowering the costs. There are many speakers on that, but that is not my game. My game is about how do we make efficiently run after the market, and then the market comes at us. So that's. And I would say the last part is how will the US, and team, you are working on this, how will the US find the people for the jobs that need to be done?
It's true. It's true.
The gap is too big. The gap is increasing. SpaceX has 283% more jobs open than a month ago. Blue Origin 115% more. So
yeah. No, I mean they can't be filled, and we not fast enough. And in part, it's because people think or they accepted a no too early and stopped looking, and part because they never thought they could. When I talk to students and teachers at community and technical colleges, they laughed thinking they could be involved in space. But those are the types of jobs that people are hiring for right now.
Yes.
So we've got enough rocket scientists. We need somebody to make the rocket.
Yes. So there are these couple of things in terms of method as a person and method as an industry, and again, a lot of method, but essentially so things to do.
Yeah, no, true. And it's great. It was great having you here today. Is there anything we missed talking about?
I don't know. We hit things on the surface. I would say beyond the ecology of keeping yourself positive, it's get help. Get help from others. Everyone is struggling in the space industry. Some folks have more models and more ideas, but there is a lot of people doing fantastic work out there. And if we can, in a way, connect and help really. Building a spreadsheet, making a connection, sharing a video, helping out with the design review, helping out with the skills development. Just do that, man. The price will come next. Just do it.
Yeah, no, agreed. And I mean, it really is surprising that, how much you can help with. And if you're just humble and say, look, I want to be involved. How can I do that?
That's my message.
It's a good one. And yeah. But yeah, thanks for being here today. And we definitely need to have you back on soon.
Thank you very much. Speak very soon.
Okay, sounds good.
That was so much fun, Goncalo. Great work. And Tim, nice job with the interview. Great to hear those stories. And I think there's a lot of truth to that as mid-career people come in or want to become space entrepreneurs or space workers, it's, it's not always a straight line path. So a lot of excitement there, and great wardrobe from both of you. It's good stuff.
I knew that team was coming. So you need to level up. No, that's an important thing.
Good stuff. All right. Well, this next panel should be fascinating. Our cryptocurrency discussion will include 3 brief presentations by Simon Drake, Aaron Burnett, and Grant Blaisdell, followed by a roundtable discussion moderated by Michael Lane. I'll introduce everyone and then kick it off. Simon Drake will encourage us to think not what cryptocurrency can do for space, but what space can do with cryptocurrency. I like that title. Co-founder of Space Venture Investors, Space Commodities Exchange, and Lunar Resources Registry. He's based in Frankfurt, Germany, and he co-founded Space Venture Investors in 2009 and is responsible for day-to-day operations. He has decades of experience as a contractor in investment banking and marketing, and worked intensively on the concept of making space investing a reality for retail investors. Passionate about the space industry, Simon also was previously a mentor at the European Copernicus Masters Accelerator Program. In 2017, he co-founded the Space Commodities Exchange in the US, and in 2019, he co-founded Lunar Resources Registry. His recent activities focus on making products for the cislunar economy. Simon, welcome.
Thanks for having me. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Yes, I'm going to go ahead and introduce all of you.
Cool.
Just glad you're here. Thank you. Aaron Burnett will speak about how community-driven finance will shape space. Aaron is the founder and CEO of Spaced Ventures, not to be confused with Space Ventures, the planet's first public space investment portal. Since its launch in June 2021, Aaron has mobilized the world's largest community of space investors to raise or commit to raise over $500,000. With a 10-plus year background in marketing and community building, Aaron is also the creator of the Mars Walkers Pinterest account, which is viewed by more than 4 million space enthusiasts each month. Prior to this, Aaron led growth for startups as well as a Fortune 500 company and spent 5 years teaching, traveling, and working remotely through South America. He is extremely passionate about democratizing access to the space innovation ecosystem. Aaron, we're glad you're here as well.
Thanks for having me. And apologize for the confusion. Simon and I aren't normally on panels back to back, so makes for a confusion distinction, but I appreciate it.
Grant Blaisdell, sort of the first person we got for this panel, will speak on creating the space asset class, mankind's greatest opportunity. He is a founder of successful tech startups such as CoinFirm and is the co-founder and CEO of Copernic Space, the platform enabling access to space assets and ventures using blockchain technology. He's third generation aerospace, and he's also president of the Lady Rocket Foundation, which recently launched their NASA JPL certified program in international markets. Grant, great to have you. Now, our moderator, hi. Now our moderator, Michael Lane, will join us, and he is from the Liftport Group. He's the CEO, and that company was founded to develop the subsystems and precursor technologies for a space elevator. And commercializing those technologies in order to pay for the space elevator was the key focus. Robotics, nanotech, material sciences, finance, and media were all part of the big idea of Liftport. And Michael has been a fundamental driving force behind Conversations for the Future since the very beginning when it was still Blue Marble Week, and has been here throughout. So thank you, Michael. And Simon, why don't you take it away?
Yes. Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to paint a picture of where we are, where we've been, where we are, and where we want to go using cryptocurrencies. So first of all, where we've been in the last 6 months, I've been looking at the markets in general, and I've been scratching my head and reading back what happened in the past hundreds of years ago. And even 100 years ago. So looking at the South Sea bubble, the Mississippi bubble, the 1920s, and the market mania that went on, because I see parallels today. And these things happen. It's just normal part of, commercial life. What I see today is quite interesting. I think there is a slight, I wouldn't call it slight actually. There is definitely kind of a bubble going on in different assets. But at the same time, we have this space system ecosystem growing, and we need capital. So to me, where we are now is we want to assemble capital using different methods for completely different purposes. For example, we don't want to raise capital just for a cool Instagram kind of app thing that lives and breathes on someone else's tablet using someone else's hardware. We actually want to build spacecraft that accomplish difficult things, and that we want to accomplish things that with a smaller budget than what a space agency has, but achieve 100 times more in terms of placing hardware in space. So fortunately, the capital markets, the wave of acquiring capital has been completely revolutionized, and Aaron will obviously fill in on that as well. Is this is great news that we're at this time when we have this need for better ways of funneling capital into the more adventurous projects. Now, I'm not saying everything is going to go right, because quite often it doesn't. So to me, the question is, okay, we have these cryptocurrencies, we have security tokens, utility tokens. Where does it end? Well, to me, the good news is that it's up to us space entrepreneurs to work out how to apply this new technology and to develop the underlying asset of these future space cryptocurrencies, space utility coins, etc. And the underlying asset is what gives the certainty of turning these new coins, money, into a real money. The history of money is a nefarious affair with lots of ups and downs, and but now the future of money has taken a different turn, and I'm sure Grant will come in on that with the way technology has evolved. And now we're at the point where we have great space concepts. We know that we need to raise capital. We know that there's different means to do it. We know that cryptocurrencies, as an example, and regulation are kind of coming together like that. And we know that we have to work together to make it happen and avoid all the pitfalls, because cryptocurrencies have had a hard time with, obviously, a lot of currencies that weren't really currencies. Just the same as, in the South Sea bubble, there were companies listed on the London Stock Exchange that weren't really companies. We've seen this all before, but now I think it's a great time to be moving ahead with space companies, space ventures. Aaron and I, we chose our names very carefully, didn't we? Because that's what we want to do. Ventures need capital. Capital's coming in different ways now. Now is the time to start working out what the assets are that underlie the new forms of space money that we want to engineer, and that's, to me, is the way forward. That's it for me. Over to Aaron.
Awesome. So I actually put together a quick kind of presentation as well, because this is a thing that I'm pretty passionate about. So I'm going to try and share my screen. Simon, maybe you can give me the verbal cue when it goes up, because when I share, I can't necessarily see people. So let's see. All right. Simon, can you see my screen?
There, you just got to, it's good.
Present mode here. Let me just lower this so I don't. All right. So I'm pretty passionate about community. And it's a pretty important thing, because, community gets tossed around quite a bit. And I think one of the key things that we are seeing as, essentially civilization, maybe if I could go a little bit too, maybe get too ambitious here. What I'm seeing with the civilization as a whole is that we're really starting to grasp and tap into the power that community has. So I'm just going to do a quick little thing over here. Hopefully you enjoy the visuals as well, because we put some work into it. I think the right background is, you need to understand that when humans come together, really big things happen. Okay, and it's not always for the best. These are some generally good examples. Sometimes it takes a really long time for things to really evolve. You could argue, farming, agriculture changed everything, and now all of a sudden we're living in massive groups in cities. And you could also see more fast moving things like, maybe the French Revolution or other things like that, where humans came together around a certain sort of belief, or maybe a certain sort of tangible need, and they came together, and big things happened as a result. What we're seeing right now, I would argue, is a movement towards moving away from tangible and location dependent reasons for coming together. What's the why people are coming together? And they're moving more towards rights, human rights, values, interest, even hobbies, shared beliefs that are more intangible and arguably even have more intrinsic value. But we're moving that direction. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that the internet exists, and I don't have to only be connected to the person next door to me because they're here. I can connect with someone a far long distance away, just because we both love space and see the future of space being very important, for example, right? So this is the setup to really what's happening right now in finance, the way I see it. Even traditional finance, let's set crypto aside for 30 seconds and come right back to it. Even traditional finance is being totally disrupted. Obviously, I put my logo in there because I'd like to think we're disruptors as well. But things that have happened in the news just in the last year, AMC, GameStop, I don't think we need to hash that out, but community came together and had their way with the markets. Private markets is where we kind of live, right? Alongside like a We Fund a Republic, but regulation, crowdfunding, people funding this, private companies with small checks, very small checks, like $100 checks or even smaller sometimes. That's a new thing. It's only been around for less than a decade, maybe like 5 years. Peer-to-peer lending as well. Like these are just examples where traditional finance is being totally, upended in its own right. And now moving into really the reason we're here, decentralized finance represents a really interesting opportunity for community in general, because it allows for engagement at a level that normally was reserved for very centralized organizations. Now you can set up, and I've been playing around with this over the last few months and learning a lot more, not as much as Grant probably knows, but learning a lot more. And it's kind of crazy the amount of things you can do through some simple, what feels like a very simple kind of interaction. And just being able to, you can borrow, lend, you can create liquidity, or, organize entire organizations, companies, things like that, all utilizing blockchain and utilizing the technology in a way that it gives the power back to the individuals, which is kind of crazy. I mean, we're really setting ourselves up for some interesting things here over the next few, definitely in the next few decades, maybe even the next few years. And even just recently, when you talk about community as it relates to cryptocurrency, as it relates to decentralized finance, just this week, so Monday, Reddit announced they're going to be tokenizing their karma points, which represents a massive kind of potential engagement of community and allowing people to monetize their engagement. That's a really interesting opportunity. And then Discord, they don't have all that many integrations. A lot of people on Discord are already in the crypto community, but they're actually going to be integrating with Ethereum. That's a big move. These are two things just happened this week where just traditional community companies or social companies are moving full speed into decentralized finance, particularly with utilizing Ethereum as the underlying infrastructure. So let's see here. I think something that's really interesting, and quite frankly, I'm just learning about this, so don't take this as a super deep dive, but decentralized authority organizations are very interesting now, because essentially it's like creating companies without management. You have the ability to pull all the decision making down to the lowest levels meaning any individual person with a token could vote. You can be a lot more algorithmic. But there's some really interesting projects that have come up just recently. You have protocol, DAOs that are doing things like creating a whole new reserve, like essentially trying to replace the Federal Reserve, like Olympus or Wonderland or some of these others. You have really focused social DAOs, essentially like a mini Facebook, friends with benefits. That's what that one stands for. Or grant DAOs, just kind of an interesting concept where people are bringing together money and just putting out, it's essentially like a SIBR or an STTR. And people are doing this. This is actually happening. And my eyes have only been opened really recently on this stuff. And so I think it's really interesting to see what's going to happen as a result of these DAOs. And so then I just take a moment to conjecture a little bit here. What could this mean for the future? What if, the short term of, in the next 5 years, you see something like I alluded to, like a SBIR program, STTR program that's 100% public driven. You could imagine essentially a DAO driven just for that. Right now, there's some that are in crypto. What if we applied that to space? I could see some really interesting things where individual people get to make decisions on where R&D funding goes. I mean, that could be really, really impactful long term. You could also talk about things like space ventures, what we do with community, bringing that over with a DAO. giving people the choice and the right to choose and how things are done. That could be very interesting. And then long term, what could this mean for, shaping organizations and governance on the moon or Mars? I get excited thinking about the really long term. I try and pull myself back every once in a while. But there's a lot of cool things happening. And with that, I'll pass it over to Grant. I think now you should be able to take over.
Thanks, guys. And yeah, you guys added a lot of background that I think is really important that I don't go too deep into on mine, especially you guys really highlighted, what I think was the power behind ICOs and kind of this whole tokenization that you're seeing in the crypto market. So I'll touch on that lightly, but thanks once again. I'm also going to be sharing a quick deck so I stay on topic and don't go in the weeds too much, because you can go a million places with this, as Aaron just showed. He's getting into DAOs. I see you're getting into the the deep forest with that, man. Okay, 1 second, guys, and I'll get it going. You guys see my screen?
Gotcha.
Right. So I love the community part around this, because at the end of the day, we also believe that the general commercial and even the average person is going to be the key driver and financier and behind this new economic growth and opportunity we're going to see in the space market. Whoa. Right. And we actually think that, technically the space market is going to be the only one that has infinite potential, right? You're seeing two markets emerge over this decade, the next decade, that are absolutely going to create, unprecedented new wealth. And crypto's already proven that. There's guys with billions of dollars in assets that you'll probably never hear of that just happened within the past couple years. And we believe the space market has the same aspect. It just needs to be assetized, right? It needs to be removed from its value being exclusively viewed and gauged from technical or scientific utility, and moved into some sort of aspect that can be more easily commercially consumed or invested in, provided liquidity to, et cetera. Right. Obviously, we all know here how big the space market is. We think that it's already a $1 trillion industry. It's just, once again, we haven't opened up those floodgates to even create really commercial community or streamline the commercial operations and investments. So we actually think these numbers should be a lot bigger already. And, Aaron has had some contribution, obviously, to point number 2 there. But there's this bottleneck that's happening, right? And we view the solutions from the crypto end for the space economy really in 2 ends. I'm very use case focused, so we're going to go right into, okay, what are the problems? How do we solve them? And what are some things happening to solve them, right? So, we have this beautiful, lovely market. It's about to hit $1 trillion, except what? There really is no market. There's no marketplace to even really do proper discovery of what we call space assets. In our case, that means tokenized products, services, ownership, data from the space economy. There's not really even a point to discover them, let alone to engage and acquire, access, and trade these assets, right? As many of you know better than me, these are tiresome, many months long processes of very manual discovery. The other one is what Simon and Aaron have focused on a little bit more, which is the issue kind of around capital, liquidity, scalability, and what crypto is going to provide to that aspect, right? So, you can't invest in SpaceX unless you're in a really privileged position and, like an ex-PayPal founder or something like that. Like, I know people that have SpaceX shares. It's not really an accessible thing, right? Aaron's doing some great work around that, some initial steps to bring that more to the public. But for example, who's an accredited investor, right? So these are all these kind of blocking points from the public being able to move in. This limits you know, we're trying to solve problems we've experienced as entrepreneurs in the place. So this kind of gatekeeping by whatever authority or investors that are kind of doing it doesn't benefit the space economy or the space entrepreneurs and companies within it. And it shuts out the public market once again from what's going to be one of the greatest wealth building opportunities in mankind's history. So it's kind of a double-edged sword of demand on both sides, but that pressure is just building and there's nothing letting it loose. Right. So we think assetizing it. So, you know, this is through various tokenization and crypto models that you can see already in play within the crypto market to create this marketplace, decentralized in the sense of entities are engaging peer to peer, but as in it's a central point, almost like an economic operating system for the space economy. Right. And you can apply blockchain in really interesting various ways. You know, Aaron got into DAOs. I'm going to get into some actual commercial use cases that are coming out over the next year that we're doing, right? And this is going to provide a whole new, you know, metaphorical fuel to these rockets in the space economy to really empower the creators in it while providing for the first time economic participation and benefit to the public. Right. But, you know, long-term end, why, you know, I also said it's the greatest opportunity in mankind's history, because if you push that development, you really empower these guys. They're going to push applications that the average person doesn't understand or see, but are going to have monumental beneficial effect on Earth. Right. In applications. So we look at that solving in two ways, creating that marketplace. We use, for example, NFTs to do that. Right. And I'm not going to go deep around NFTs, non-fungible tokens, and why we specifically use those. I'm always happy to have a separate conversation with anyone here about it. And then something we call the space pool, which you saw Aaron mention DeFi. So that's us kind of bringing this kind of regulated DeFi element to the space economy, right? And the space smart end, we view the commercialization market through a supply and demand end. Like, for example, supply side, I'll get into it in a second, is a great example is payload space. Right? This is, you have a marked amount of an asset that you can place on the marketplace, say, hey, here this is to buy, to be commercialized, and you can go back and forth and acquire the rights to that cargo or payload space, for example, through an NFT, right? And then you have the demand side. For example, we think about 90% of the satellite data market is going to be demand-based, which is going to be entities coming on and saying, hey, I need this, and who can do it for me? Right. So we once again apply NFTs in a very unique way. And I'll mention a unique way around satellite data. We're doing it real quick. Right. So space pool is simple. We address the two biggest problems. More early stage ventures, you know, have really hard access to capital. That community thing that Aaron talked about, you know, I come out of the crypto space for over 8 years at this point. I've worked around ICOs, which means initial coin offerings. I've even ran one successfully. That automatically builds a community of economic participants and people who have an emotional attachment to your project by allowing an early stage venture to go, hey guys, here's tokens representing either our shares or some sort of utility and future revenues, et cetera. Buy it, right? This is an investment, quote unquote, opportunity for you guys, right? You can take all these space VCs, you can take the governments, they can't hold a candle and won't break that bridge down for the financing that the public can provide. We saw that in ICOs where in 2018, 17, 18, 19, they outfunded all VCs around this technology, right? By allowing the public to invest in it. And then we saw it with GameStop this past year where public just ate the biggest hedge fund. How? Community driven, emotional attachment, and allowing that sort of liquidity to flow, right? And that liquidity is both ends, in and for the investor out, right? You don't have a 10-year liquidation event if you're lucky, like in space right now, but it's pretty much a liquid asset right away. Right. And then you have issues with Musk is still going around selling shares to SpaceX, actually kind of privately he did last year. Right. Why is he doing that? He needs liquidity. So why can't these space companies who have hundreds of millions of dollars in contracted revenue leverage that contracted revenue for fast liquidity at a set interest rate? Liquidity pools in crypto allow that opportunity. They're just not being used in that sort of aspect. Right. But then let's get to a core commercial kind of case. So this is how we're applying NFTs to set a new standard for commercialization of payload space. And we're also engaging the market a different way. You know, it's less, not so technical. We want, you know, Gucci, we want Microsoft, we want these brands to send things to the moon as well and economically participate in it. Right. In this case, which actually the private sale for this starts in 2 weeks, we're tokenizing Lunar Outpost rover. It's going to the moon. In the private sale, you can buy, you know, through an NFT, the rights to your space and actually send it to the moon. And in the public sale, will be the first time ever that the general public can buy and own a piece of space, and really the first space asset ever. All of these NFTs that they buy are divisible and tradable, meaning they can make new smaller ones out of it and they can resell those, right? So we're creating the space asset market and the first secondary market for space at the same time. So if anyone's interested in this, you know, you can contact me directly. Then we get into more of Aaron's side of things, which, you know, allowing everyone to become a space investor, right? So we plan on doing security token offerings towards the end of next year, which would be the first ones that really allows the general public to truly invest in the space economy and have a liquid asset on top of it. And then on that satellite data aspect, you can use NFTs in an interesting way around satellite data and licenses. So our first way we're doing is with Exodus Orbitals by allowing you to buy a license to demand X amount of photos from Lunar Outpost software on satellites. And with that NFT, you directly access your license and the user interface to request and download those photos from the satellite. Right? So imagine scaling up the commercialization of satellite data and trust around that aspect. And that's it, guys. I just wanted to run through some kind of things that are actually happening on the ground right now in the application of this tech from an economical perspective. And once again, thanks to the guys before me because they laid out some really core stuff for me.
Right. Terrific. All three of you, Simon, Aaron, Grant, so interesting. I am really excited about this potential blurring of the Venn diagram of commercial space nerds and crypto nerds, and that there's, I mean, I think it's like a 1-to-1, right? It's a 1-to-1 Venn diagram where if you're really interested in advanced technology, you may not know the details of orbital mechanics, or you may not know the details of, you know, who Satoshi is or was, but there's some overlap. So space people know something about crypto people know something about space. And I just think that this merge is fascinating. I've been predicting it for quite a while, and it's really neat to see it start to happen. So nice job. Each of y'all are doing some pretty cool stuff. I'm gonna put Simon momentarily on the spot here because I'm gonna read a message from Simon back in 2016, June 2016 to me. I'm not reading the whole thing, but he's like, P.S. I'm working on how to get projects like your Liftport into a crowdfunding ecosystem. There's a way to sell big infrastructure sci-fi concepts to the mass market investors. So that was my first interaction with Simon. And now fast forward, here we are 5-6 years later. All of us are talking about how to democratize space commitments, investments. We're all using similar or different, you know, somewhat different tools, but let's talk about that. Let's talk about how you democratize space by using these new tools. So I'm going to let be a little freeform here, but, you know, Grant, you've talked about, you know, most people can't buy one satellite, but maybe they can buy a 100th of a satellite. Aaron, you've got three companies up on your site right now, ready to take investments. So let's talk about the philosophy of micro investing and democratizing space, because I think that's going to change absolutely everything. Jump in there, Simon, because you actually started it with me a couple of years ago. So I'm going to give you first lead on this.
Yeah, 2016. I was creating a equity crowdfunding website for our company, and then I dropped it because I had other priorities to do, and I noticed that the community takes care of the things itself. So as a entrepreneur, the biggest pitfall is when you try to do everything, you get nothing done. So for me, it's a bit of a godsend that cryptocurrency has come along and the community has come along to solve a problem, which is democratizing capital. Just a few points. This is how I see it. If I want to buy, I can't buy one satellite, but I certainly can buy shares in lots of satellite companies. All right. So in some ways, the democratizing of space has already happened, and we've just seen, I call it the SPAC attack, the space SPAC attack. And I'm not going to go into the valuations and where they should be or what's going on there. That's another conversation with like a 2-drink minimum. So, but if we want to position next generation terms of trading, whether it's securities token, utilities token, we have to compete with existing capital markets, which is stocks and SPACs and options. Okay, so we have to come up with something that is a lot more competitive and interesting than buying shares in Virgin Galactic, which is interesting in itself. So I think that is also the challenge, is using this new crypto blockchain-based platforms to do yesterday's tricks might work, but I think we really have to turn it on the next generation ventures that really need this capital. Like, there's no sense using this new doorway of capital to do something to fund, geostationary communication satellites. That's already been done. That's now like a blue chip kind of investment almost. We really have to focus on the things that are difficult. And I'm sure there's lots of investor appetite. And one thing I found really interesting, what Grant was talking about, was the ability of this, let's call it a token or a currency, to give a measure of price discovery of demand. Because a lot of the entrepreneurial activities I do, for example, a space commodities exchange, we're going, yeah, we always get this comment, where's your market? And so I'm like, well, how do we form this market when there is, if it's very hard, it's like a moving target. Well, maybe cryptocurrencies can provide us with a market signal, which is a price signal based on a very, very simple, option of an option. So I'm looking forward to these innovations, but as long as it fits into an underlying asset. I think this is the big caveat here, is we really need to nail down what the underlying asset is behind anything, because that is that's what the customer wants, and the customer's right. So that's me.
I've been at this a year and I still can't remember to turn on and off the mute button. Aaron, democratization of space, how do you see it playing out?
Yeah, I think there's, I think Simon hit on a lot of specific things. What we view, what we're trying to do is bridge. I think over the next 5 to 10 years, a lot's happening in finance. It's already happening now, right? But we see there's a fight between the SEC and cryptocurrency. It seems like they want to just take it all down. Potentially, I don't know, right? We kind of have to see where this happens. That's just the U.S. market specifically. There's going to be an international concept at play there too. Different countries taking different stances, potentially meaning companies want to go different ways for that reason. Different, moving to different countries. So there's a lot happening. What we have said is, there is a pretty massive funding gap for early stage space companies. So let's go get those early stage space companies the money they need right off the bat, right? It's very, VCs right now are kind of, spoiled, I think, in some ways, like SaaS VCs, where it's like, oh yeah, just bring me the product and $1 million ARR, and then I'll invest in you. It doesn't work for space, and I think I saw, Starbridge and probably a couple other guys on it. They know exactly what we're talking about, and so some of the first conversations we had when we were going out with space ventures was to the space VCs who know this intimately. And so there's a lot of money that's, not going into early stage companies that are doing really interesting things. So we said, let's get the public involved. And there's a massive appetite, just as Simon alluded to, with the space SPAC. So that's a very traditional finance approach. We're utilizing regulation crowdfunding, which is A-OK kind of regulatory environment we can operate under. We have a license and all that stuff. Having said that, there's a lot of interesting kind of things you can do in decentralized finance, sitting underneath Ethereum infrastructure and all that stuff. There's a lot of interesting things you can do with smart contracts, and there's a lot of cool things that I think we'll end up doing. One of the tricks I think Grant alluded to or mentioned becoming here is a security token. That I think can really change things. That's really interesting because securitizing, using tokens and attaching them to securities, there's this whole argument back and forth with the SEC right now. Is cryptocurrency security? Is it a currency? Blah, 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 blah. Once there's a security token, I know Republic is trying to, I think they're still trying to, they published a white paper on trying to go through an SEC approval process to sell a security token. So I kind of want to see what happens there. Or if Grant, you come up with one first, I would love to see the first people to come out with these, because this could be really interesting, a really interesting way to just sit on current exchanges. If you can wrap some of these securities, very easy to pass things back and forth, and it relates back to securities right now. But as far as like community, democratization, I'm sorry, I'm waxing eloquent here, comes back to, for me, getting people meaningful access to space. So we've been talking about democratizing access to space for a long time. People are going up in rockets, but the people that are going up in rockets were either very lucky to win something or very rich. And so that's not a true, democratized access. It's nice to say that, but it's really been for a very select few. And so what we'd like to see is more people meaningfully involved. And one way to be meaningfully involved is to invest. And, I think that's kind of that first step we're trying to take. Ultimately for me, 20 years from now, I want to see like regular trips back and forth to the moon. So that that's what I'm trying to make happen. And if that doesn't happen 20 years from now, I don't want to be in a position where there's folks watching, a moon landing many years ago, and they anticipated we'd be going back and forth to the moon already, and it's not happening. I don't want that to be us 20, 30, 40 years from now, right? I want us to ramp up innovation so fast. We don't know what to do with it. Hardware innovation, not just more software innovation, hardware innovation, so that we can be on a rocket 30 years from now, looking back at this conversation, saying, hey, it helped to spark something that, we're on our way to Mars. So that's me, passion driven, kind of focused.
Beautiful. Grant, democratization. What are we doing?
Yeah. Once again, we view that through two ends. So there's one part around investments. So I brought up the security token offerings, right? So that's that's tokenization of, shares usually, right? Putting that on, qualified KYC AML people, but, the general public, they don't have to be accredited investors.
Grant, you're using a lot of words that I know, but I think a lot of people in our audience don't know.
Which one was it?
AML, KYC.
Yeah, so AML and KYC. AML is anti-money laundering. KYC is know your client. These are the basic regulatory kind of fences you have to pass through, or filters on almost any sort of financial tied application where funds are moving back and forth, right? A lot of the times you don't notice you're going through it because your credit card or your bank is representing that for you, right? But if you're dealing with crypto and any traditional, like real big exchanges, you have to go through these processes. Robinhood, all these sort of things require you to eventually go through this sort of process.
Yeah. So sorry, Grant, to interrupt, but that's something we have to do. If someone goes to our website, you got to put a social security number in. It's very intrusive. This is the old world of making sure people aren't, throwing money, laundering money around. So we go through all that stuff too. Yeah.
Well, for example, we leverage KYC so that space companies don't sell anything to Chinese nationals or companies, right?
Super important, right?
Yes. So there's the security token offering part, which I think is more understandable, easy to understand. And one thing people are forgetting a lot of time is the back end of that, which is I now have pretty much an instantly liquid asset. Gone are the days of the 10-year liquidation event if you're lucky for your space investment, right? And the other model is utility tokens. So most of these initial coin offerings you saw years ago, and a lot of the ones that are still happening, they're still happening. They're just not as loud. These are what are called utility tokens. Little secret, like 99.9% of them were actually pretty much securities. Okay. Very few of them actually had true utilities, but in a space element, actually, they'll probably put one of these as a security token. But for example, I am a satellite company. I want to shoot up this new kind of satellite we're developing, develop it and shoot it up. This is how much I need. I'd create a campaign hosted on Copernic Space, shoot it out to the public. They do their marketing around it, and they tie the ownership of the token to future revenue generated by the satellite. Right. And that's all tied, automated to smart contracts. People hold a token that holds their rights to that. Right. And then you have just like what could literally be utility tokens in a true sense, which is I'm buying a token off the market that gives me access to take pictures on this satellite. Right. That's like a true utility token. But we don't only approach it from. Oh, and then there's the liquidity pools aspect, which most people aren't talking about at all, which is fascinating to me, which is liquidity pools are pretty much thousands of people are all staking capital in a pool of capital that's being leveraged and used around arbitrage and exchanges, right, of different sort of assets. We're going to funnel that into, a model against those contracted revenue things, right? There's all these different tokenization models you can go around financing and liquidity, which my belief is, period, that's going to be a true foundation for the space economy and its financing. You're looking at most of space VCs, they're not that big. You look at most of the governments, they're not putting in that much at real high risk capital into this stuff, and only the people are going to represent that. But the other thing that's missing is how space companies can use tokenization to extend their revenue and their business models, scale it up, right? Like we want to provide a real solution that applies NFTs, that takes these, business processes that takes months and busts them down into hours or days, right? But the other side of that is like with the Lunar Outpost sale, they're not only getting a new, more streamlined, scalable way to commercialize the space they have, but remember, those people now own an asset that's tied to the original owner, which is Lunar Outpost. When he sells it to someone else, Lunar Outpost gets a percentage of that sale in perpetuity, right? It might end up that Lunar Outpost makes more money off secondary market sales than they do off the initial sale.
So let's dig a little further into that, because smart contracts on non-fungible tokens, NFTs, are really at the heart of this, right? That these are, when you go and sell a herd of cattle on the Chicago Board of Options Exchange, you're not driving cattle across the granite floors of the Chicago board, right? What you're doing is, I have a document, a piece of paper that says, this is the health, the weight of the cattle. We've got 100 head. They're going to be at this dock, at this place, at this time. And I'm handing this piece of paper and you're handing me your piece of paper, money, and that's the trade, right? So what we're doing is we're digitizing that process in these token assets and saying, all right, I'm just using ones and zeros to replace the paper that currently exists. All right, so we're taking that idea and we're taking it out into space, and we're saying, what is the value of a liter of water on the International Space Station?
Let the market decide.
What's that?
Let the market decide, right?
Exactly.
Another big issue, you talk to space companies, they don't even know what to charge for their stuff. The market prices are inflated by government contracts. So let the market decide.
The market discovery process is super convoluted.
One quick thing to that, if I may. One thing is to your example is, well, now I can buy half a cow.
Right.
And
yes.
That's that democratization element. So for example, with Lunar Outpost case, in the private sale, you have to buy 100 grams or more. So you can actually, that's the minimum to physically send something up. But in the public sale, you can buy 1/10 of a gram, right? And that's where, tokenization really provides this democratization element. Is now, your 18-year-old son can own the first space asset ever. And, if the market decides that in 2 months from then it's worth 5 times more, then that's what the market decided, and he can take that.
And that's the value of these smart contracts, right? That there's a lot of different ways that they can be split and used and modified. So let's put on your crystal ball, put on your pull out your crystal ball for a second. We only have about 13 minutes, so we can go a little bit deep into this and say, because Aaron, you said something a few minutes ago about 20 years, 30 years about regular trips back and forth to the moon. Sir, I got to challenge you on that. I really, really, really hope you're wrong about that. I think it's going to be a whole lot sooner. We just found out from the NASA administrator they're playing back to 2025, but that's still 3 years. That's not 3 decades. So fingers crossed about that.
Yeah, I would say just to give you a concept, I'm talking about like people are already sitting there, and this is like tourism style.
Right.
Like that's what I want, right? Because by the way, I'm no explorer. I am no Neil Armstrong or fill in the blank explorer that, is going to go risk their life. Like I kind of need to have at least 100,000 people sitting there already. Like there's probably a bar already up there or whatever it is, that's what I'm talking about 20 years. So that's a pretty fast. Most people are less aggressive than me in my timelines, but I think one of the things that is really interesting, you alluded to with the smart contracts, and what's happening here is, the ability that like an Ethereum or any of these like really smart contract enabled kind of blockchains allow you to do is you can basically do anything you want on them, right? You can build a lot of different things. And that's where these DAOs that are coming up are really interesting, and they're just starting to take off. I mean, it's very early. Let's all be honest. Like 5 years from now, we could all be laughing, or maybe next year we could all be laughing that I was talking about DAOs. Who knows? Right. But, the idea is that there's a lot of interesting organizations that are coming up. And this is something where I think what you'll see sooner rather than later is literally an SBIR, STTR style kind of replacement where public gets to vote directly with their tokens on who's getting R&D funding, right? I mean, I wouldn't be surprised at all to see small checks. I mean, Uniswap Grants is a DAO that already does this for crypto projects. They did $750,000 across, 20 some companies or something. That's not nothing, but you could imagine that this is something that actually could organize quite a bit of crypto money. And there's a lot, Grant knows, there's a lot of people with a lot of these assets that kind of playing around with stuff. and you could invest in another meme coin, or you could potentially put some of your gains towards like pushing humanity into the stars. There's a lot of people that are interested in that. So I wouldn't be surprised. That's actually relatively short term. We see things like that happen, which, as we all know, we need as much of that kind of early R&D funding, taking something from a TRL 1, 2, 3 to 4, 5, 6 and beyond, right? Yeah. And then, actually making companies investable after that. Hopefully we can step in at that point, as Space Ventures. But I'll let Simon and Grant take a stab at some of the future too.
Yeah, what does the future look like? Let's put into boxes of now to 2025, like short term. And then assuming that that's true, we're going to come back to it and say from 25 to 30, and assuming that that's true from 30 to 35. So kind of three answers. Let's go just the first 3 years right off the bat. Simon, you got any predictions about the next 3 years, and relate it back to your own project?
Okay. Well, before I go to the next 3 years, I want to go to the destination. So the destination for Space Coiners Exchange is to be trading commodities in space. And in 15 years, that could be extracting water from the moon, taking it to a Lagrange point or a geosynchronous orbit, or even low Earth orbit. And then it's used as propulsion. So in the beginning, I think at the moment, we can think in terms of like a 10-liter propulsion contract. In 10 years, it's got to be 1,000 liters. It's got to be bigger. It's got to scale up. with the other company I have, Lunar Resources Registry, we're working on making a Lunar Resources registration as a service. You can't own anything on the moon. This is very important when I talk about the underlying asset. What is it? Because in a legal term, we don't want to get into, we don't want to veer into the gray side, you know, of what we're selling. So in my mind, in a 10-year goal is we want landers on the moon testing regolith to pave the way for operations that can convert regolith into platinum group metals or oxygen or whatever you want. So I look at from a 5 to 10 year point of view, we should be like a mining company that has to put down 100 landers with 100 drills. And you know, 10% of those will be good, and only 2% of them might be, you know, a proper mining operation. So that amount of capital alone, let's just call it, you know, let's say that the cost of getting landers there became significantly down. As an example, so if that was a $100 million operation, just ignore inflation and all that, and you could divide that into securities tokens. To me, the next 3-year goal would be to work out how to get such an operation, divide it up, so that even someone who thinks that they have no potential in this area, some kid who has a smartphone, all kids have smartphones, even, you know, in some of the less well-developed countries, even if they can put $1, $2, $3, you know, I was going to say yuan, but why not yuan? All right. Whatever it is, a Kiwi dollar, a rupee. I mean, the end goal of what we're talking about is complete democratization, where somebody anywhere with access to a smartphone can have access to a token, which has access to a share. Again, back to the underlying asset. And the share is of a company doing something completely breathtaking and amazing. I think we're on the verge of overtaking a lot of existing industries that have all this excitement about them. You look at sports and how much money that's, you know, sucks in with gambling and all that. I think with space we can do it. We just have to come up with the right enterprises, ventures. And most exciting thing about cryptocurrency is now you can commoditize it, democratize it. You know, divide these assets into smaller and smaller bits and get more people involved in it. As long as we stay true to our core, I think it's all possible. So,
I'm a little less futuristic than these two guys. I'm really like hyper focused on, you know, executing the things that I can and see in my, you know, through my windshield. But my thing is, you know, to build the rails that allow these guys who really get into truly building that long-term future. So, you know, I'll just address the first 3 years, I think you defined or whatever. So to what the guys are saying, I mean, you know, within the next couple months with the private sale and the public sale, you're going to see the first democratization of, you know, any ownership in space in reality. Like I mentioned earlier, our plans are to be able to launch a security token offering for the first one for a space company towards the end of next year. And I love, you know, what Aaron was, because what Aaron was getting into around DAOs and kind of the governance is, and you know, deciding which to fund what. These are really like the future of liquidity pools that I mentioned, right? So we hope that we can get through the regulatory aspect, which is actually a little bit more complicated for what we're trying to do probably around the liquidity pools than it is for the security token offering. Like there's already companies that have licenses to do security token offerings and have like their own secondary market behind it. The main issue is just, you know, companies. Listen, the space, one reason why it's such a unique opportunity in space is because space really isn't regulated. It doesn't have 150 years of incumbent administrative bureaucratic crap stacked on top of each other. Like almost, you know, why isn't tokenized real estate like a big thing yet? Jesus, I can't afford a whole apartment, but I could afford, you know, a 100th of an apartment, right? It's like, it's the same sort of approach towards tokenizing. And, you know, I love how Simon approaches, you know, the commodity aspect. right? And, you know, another reason we don't see, you know, the commodities market being totally tokenized right now is, once again, you got 150 years of incumbent administrative, legal, regulatory stuff around it. So, you know, we have, for example, core things that we want to execute over the next year. And, you know, along with that, that I didn't mention is kind of these alternative tokenized, kind of more utility token fundraising aspects, like that might be considered securities, which is, hey, you're buying a token that represents X percentage of revenue from this satellite in the future. And then the other one is what I was mentioning around satellite data. We're big believers at Copernic Space in really the value for mankind, the commercial scalability around satellite data and imagery. So, you know, our plan is that we think there's about a 2-year curve around a lot of this becoming like normal and something to use what we're doing, but allowing, you know, like our case was Saving the Survivors. It's a humanitarian or big organization, known organization in South Africa that focuses on fighting poachers and saving endangered rhinos, right? So, you know, we're working with them, right, to streamline this process so they can get on-demand imagery, or they can get consistent, you know, space data sets that help them do this, instead of using radios and having, you know, guys walking around an 800,000 square mile fence, right? So our whole thing is to provide actual functional kind of usage around this as well. So that, yeah, that's what I see in the next 3 years, is those, you know, across the financing and the commercialization points, so that, you know, the next payload space case that we do, you know, just runs like water. Like you can buy payload and send something to the moon in minutes if you want to, right? So, you know, we got a big road ahead of us, but all this stuff is to be it's doable. Like Aaron said, the technology, like Copernic Space is a 6-year-old concept. We just didn't start it 6 years ago because the tech and the market mentality wasn't there yet, but the tech is getting there now. And all this stuff is doable in the short term. It's just a matter of all these people like us coming together and really working towards that. And, you know, the incumbents, the big guys, even NASA, I've talked to NASA, hey, we're not focused on you guys, but here's how you can use these tools and features to, you know, commercialize IP that you're just sitting on billions of dollars worth, right? So I could keep going for a long time, obviously, with this, but I think it's a good time to end.
All right, it is coming up on time to end. I'm going to count that as your closing statements. But Simon and Aaron, you know, I have like specific questions about that. Aaron, you've got 3 companies posted right now. You're still in what you consider your beta. What do you think that's going to look like, you know, when you come out of beta? And you know, are you the Kickstarter for space projects?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think, you know, what we're really building towards, so when I call beta, it's just we need fuller functionality, support for different types of investors, all of the different payment options, and we're pretty limited right now. We're just putting out what we can. That's why we call it beta. But, you know, honestly, I do think in the next 3 years, this is an audacious goal, but I do think we'll have 1 million space investors going through this platform. That's the type of passion I think that exists, and the type of ownership that people want. And so we're really going towards building a 1 million person plus space investor community, because I'm really community centric around that. So, you know, then we can start to turn in that community into all sorts of interesting things, right? Like we talked about a SIBR STTR replacement potentially. You know, there's all sorts of interesting things there. So that's kind of what we think of. You know, crowdfunding for space is you know, one aspect, but really is about the space investment community, because then we can plug that into a lot of interesting technologies. That's the hope.
For better and for worse, my project had the first $100,000 Kickstarter project, and it was both good and bad. I'm happy to share some of my good and bad. I count myself as a cautionary tale because I made a lot of errors there. Simon,
Got to take care of that community. That's the thing people don't realize. They want to, everybody wants to do token sales, but they don't realize you got to manage those people. Then.
right. I made a lot of early errors that cost me a lot. So we could go into a whole nother conversation about that. Simon, with your exchange, what does the next 3 years look like very specifically and quickly?
With the exchange, it's working on designing products, raising capital in a stepped fashion. The end goal as an exchange, it's an infrastructure project. So the end goal might be an infrastructure style kind of bond offering. But back to what we've been talking about tonight, or daytime for you guys, is that who needs infrastructure level, private partnership bonds when you can do it from a massive community,
Everybody's
and I think this is the change that would be so welcome. But like anything, I think, as Grant alluded to, you've got to manage these community. Someone's got to write the code for the token. Someone's got to proofread it. Someone's got to read the contracts, and this is the fun bit. There is no easy way of deploying, some platform and everyone comes along, and it doesn't work like that. It's just concentration on the goal and, making all ticking all the boxes, etc. Just one point, what Grant was saying before, industries that have had 100, 200, 300 years, in some cases 1,000 years of trading like commodities, and they've built these moats around themselves, and space doesn't really have that moat, except from there are laws to do with space, and I've read
FAA mainly, from what I've seen, is like the big one.
But to me, it's an open pasture. So, and we really have to work on it before other players come into that and try and work it their own way. So I'll leave off on that. We have to work it very quickly.
Right. Yeah, it's like 1998 in the internet, or it's like 9 years ago in crypto. Like the space, like everyone has an opportunity to plant their flag around blockchain applications in space.
It's the wild, wild west. Well, gentlemen, thank you very much. Appreciate your time. I know it's late for you, Simon. Appreciate that. Thank you. We're turning it back over.
Hey, it's later for me. I should get the bigger thanks. What is
you were in Miami last time. Where are you now?
I'm in Warsaw, so
Oh yeah, okay, all right, even later. Yeah, you were in Miami last time I saw you. Okay, cool.
I'm just
all right. Anyway, really appreciate all of y'all. Thank you very much. Turning it over to Lead and Tim to close out the day. Thanks everybody. This has been a great year for me on these events. Next. December 7th last year was when we started these things, and this is me signing off. So I really have had a great year, and this has been an amazing adventure. So thanks, everybody.
Bravo, Michael. And Grant, you're in Warsaw looking like a Renaissance painting, like a Rembrandt. Appreciate the discussion. Really got my brain going.
I'll take that as a compliment.
Really got my brain going about pooling data for AI applications. We just don't know enough about it. We just don't have enough capacity to work with satellite data the way we should be. And I was kind of thinking about applications from your discussion. Thank you so much. And that brings our 12th monthly event to a fitting end, looking forward to the future of Space Money. Foundation for the Future puts on this event each month, and this was our 12th. That's a full year of conversations about space infrastructure development put on by Foundation for the Future. I want to thank our generous sponsors, first and foremost, Terry Trevino, and also the Space Force Association, the International Space Elevator Consortium, Otter Public Relations, and Thunderbird School of Management's Executive Master of Global Management in Space Leadership, Business, and Policy. We thank these organizations for their partnership and generosity. I also want to give a shout out to our friends in the audience who choose to pay the optional $30 registration donation, and those who are active in the chat throughout the day, adding expertise, curiosity, and enthusiasm to our conversations. Thank you all for an amazing year. We are currently seeking additional sponsors for our 2022 program in cash or crypto, and I hope you'll consider helping us cover those costs.
Was I the first crypto one?
Pardon me?
Was I the first crypto payer ever, Tim?
Were. Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, there we go. Awesome.
Awesome. Tim, why don't you close us out? Wonderful year. Thank you so much for this opportunity, and it's been great.
No, it really has. So 12 months ago, Michael and I were talking about putting this on. He said, this is a cool idea, maybe do it quarterly. I said, let's do it monthly. And he said, you're insane. And I said, you're probably right. He's probably more convinced of that than ever. But we had 290 people that first event. Last month was almost 6,000. And so that is people in the room, that is live stream viewers. It's really been an impressive growth that between Michael and Lee, we could not have done this. So thanks for that. And as Lee was mentioning, yes, we just pulled together our 2022 sponsorship package, and you get a chance to essentially reach an audience of comparable size and expertise as almost any of the major space conferences other than Symposium. And you get to do that monthly for about the same price as one of those events. So reach out to me, to Lee, to April, and we can get you more information about that and help get you some more exposure in the community. I think as we've heard over the past couple of days, there is a lot of excitement and new things happening around space money. And some of the challenges you've heard are the very reason we formed the Association for the Future, to help organize and create a unified voice for this community. And many of the voices you heard are members or potential members of that association. So we're excited to be able to amplify some of their voices in this sort of venue. But yeah, with that, we'll sign off and see you in 22.
Wait, Tim. There's a question. We see that the donate button on the website goes to PayPal or credit card. Where is the Coinbase wallet that people can use to donate crypto? Thank you so much.
Bye, all. Thank you.